The Roman authorities finally released the last batch of grains from the public stores on August 22, AD 79. As I stand in the crowded streets of Pompeii's Forum Triangulare, I breathe in the scent of freshly baked bread wafting from the nearby Thermopolis, a mixture of sweet and savory aromas that makes my stomach growl with hunger. The temperature is sweltering, pushing past 30 degrees Celsius, as the sun beats down relentlessly on the cobblestones beneath my feet. I can feel the rough texture of worn stone underfoot, polished smooth by years of foot traffic. What if the tremors that had been rumbling through the region for weeks suddenly intensified? What would happen to this bustling market square when the earthquakes hit? Would anyone manage to escape? If you're listening to this to fall asleep, that's exactly why I make these. Drop a comment and tell me where you are and what time it is. I read every single one. The air remains calm for now, carrying only the faint hum of conversation from the townspeople going about their day, completely unaware of the impending disaster. The scent of roasting vegetables wafts through the air, carried on a gentle breeze that stirs the dust motes dancing in the fading light. You breathe it in deeply, savoring the earthy aroma of yesterday's harvest, now transformed by heat and oil into something rich and savory. You are standing outside Lupanar 8, one of several taverns catering to the workers' needs near the base of Mount Vesuvius. The sign above the entrance creaks in the breeze, bearing a faded image of a boar's head, the symbol of Dionysus, god of wine and revelry. Inside, the sounds of evening preparations fill the air. Clinking pots, murmured conversations, and the occasional burst of laughter from patrons huddled around small tables. The air is thick with the smell of roasting meat, simmering sauces, and the faint tang of wood smoke carried in on a stray draft through the open doorway. You weave your way past the bustling staff, exchanging nods or brief greetings as you make your way to the counter. Behind it stands Lucius, Lupanar 8's owner, his bushy eyebrows etched with worry lines that deepen when he thinks about anything beyond today's dinner service. "Ah, good evening," he says, nodding toward a steaming tray of vegetables on display. "Our special tonight is roasted eggplant and onions fresh from the market this morning." You take in the vibrant colors and enticing aromas as you consider your options. To one side, several workers huddle over small jugs of wine, their faces lit by the warm glow of oil lamps suspended above their heads. On the other side of the counter, a lone figure sits with his back to the room, lost in thought. Perhaps he's savoring something more substantial than just the food. You make your choice and take it up to one of the available tables near the fire pit. The wood crackles as the flames die down for the night, casting flickering shadows on the walls that seem almost alive in the fading light. As you sit, a serving girl no older than 12 or 13 years old brings over your selection, roasted eggplant and onions heaped onto a crusty loaf of bread. You tear into it with relish, enjoying the burst of flavors as the tender vegetables mingle with the slightly sweet tang of olive oil on the bread. The room is warm from the lingering heat of dinner service, but you notice how the atmosphere shifts subtly once the evening meal is finished, and patrons begin to disperse or settle in for a long night's conversation. Conversation ebbs and flows like the breeze outside, an ebb and flow that Lucius has learned to navigate over years spent running his tavern. A nearby table erupts into laughter as two workers recount some tale of their workday, exaggerating with each retelling until it becomes almost impossible to discern fact from fiction. The serving girl rolls her eyes good-naturedly and refills the wine jug for them, though she doesn't look particularly amused by the antics. A gentle breeze rustles through your hair as you sit back in your chair, surveying the room with a sense of satisfaction. For a brief moment between courses and conversations, all feels right with the world. Food on the table, friends nearby, and a flickering fire to warm your hands. The serving girl takes away your empty bread loaf and replaces it with a small jug of wine, her movements practiced but not quite confident in their fluidity. She's been helping out at Lupanar 8 for only a few months now, long enough to know the routine, yet still learning how to navigate its rhythms. You take a sip from your cup as you sit back into your chair, feeling the wine slide down smoothly toward your stomach. Outside, night is beginning to fall in earnest. Stars are kindling above Vesuvius slopes like scattered sparks on black velvet, though they cast little light beyond their immediate vicinity and even less within the nearby buildings. Time passes slowly at Lupanar 8 this evening, with its warm air filled by conversations that sometimes touch on politics or gossip, but often veer into more mundane discussions about work schedules, tools gone missing from the workshops, or who owes what to whom in small loans passed around between patrons. As I made my way through the crowded hallways of Lupanar 8, the scent of cooking oil and roasting meats wafted from the kitchen, mingling with the sounds of raucous laughter and hushed conversations. The patrons had all but forgotten about their troubles in the outside world, caught up as they were in the simple pleasures of a warm meal and good company. I spotted Famia, one of the more seasoned waitresses, expertly juggling multiple trays laden with steaming plates of food as she made her way through the crowded dining area. Her eyes sparkled with amusement as she navigated between tables, dodging outstretched hands and flailing elbows as patrons reached for their glasses or gestured expansively to emphasize a point. "Mind if I join you?" I asked Famia, nodding towards an empty chair at her table by the window. "Not at all," she said with a smile. "I was just telling the others about my niece's wedding preparations back in Neapolis. The poor child is going through some drama." As we chatted and laughed together, I couldn't help but notice the subtle undercurrent of tension running beneath the surface of our conversation. It wasn't hard to pick up on the whispers exchanged between Famia and a few other patrons, snippets about distant earthquakes, warnings from neighboring towns about possible eruptions, or hushed discussions about fleeing in advance. I made a mental note to mention these concerns to my employer, Marcus, later that evening when I reported for duty. It wasn't that I wanted to spread alarmist rumors, more that I felt it prudent to prepare the staff and patrons of Lupanar 8 for any eventualities. After finishing our meal, Famia excused herself to attend to a table nearby where an elderly patron was complaining about his wine being too warm. As she poured him a fresh glass from the cooler in the kitchen, the commotion outside grew louder, people rushing past, shouting something about ash falling on Pompeii's walls. Famia returned with the elderly man's drink and smiled wryly as he complained again. "Don't worry," she said good-naturedly, "it'll probably pass by tomorrow morning." But I noticed her eyes flick towards a gathering of townspeople huddled near the entrance to Lupanar 8, their faces illuminated by torches held aloft like specters in the fading light. Marcus himself emerged from his office at that moment, looking every inch the worried merchant as he surveyed the growing crowd. He nodded curtly to me and gestured towards the back of the hallways. I need you, he said quietly. Let's talk. We made our way through a side door into a narrow corridor lined with linen-draped storage rooms, each containing crates stacked haphazardly with wine jugs, bottles of oil, or baskets of fresh produce. Marcus paused in front of one such room and turned to me. It seems the situation has escalated, he said gravely, glancing nervously at his watch for what must have been the 10th time that evening. Some folks are whispering about a possible evacuation order from Sulla's men. You know how it is with rumors. I shook my head, trying not to smile at Marcus's obvious unease. Look, he continued hastily, the point is we need to be prepared for anything now. I've spoken to the owners of other establishments in town, and they're all scrambling to secure their assets or flee if possible. But Lupanar 8 has something going for it. People will always want a warm meal and good company. Marcus's eyes narrowed as he surveyed me. I want you on duty tonight, keeping an ear out for anything that might affect our business. If Sulla does issue evacuation orders, we'll need to act fast if we're going to save what little stockpiles we have, food, wine, the works. As I nodded and made a mental note of Marcus's instructions, Famia slipped into the corridor behind us, her expression concerned. Excuse me, she said quietly to Marcus. I think you'd better speak with our friend in back. He wants an update on what we're doing about, well, everything. Marcus hesitated for a moment before nodding curtly and following Famia down into the depths of Lupanar 8's bowels, leaving me alone in the narrow corridor. It was then that I heard it, the distant rumble of ash falling from above, growing louder by the minute. The acrid tang of smoke and ash clung to your skin like a damp shroud, carried on the breeze from the distant rumble that grew louder by the minute. You stood in the forum, surrounded by the daily bustle of Pompeii's residents going about their business as if nothing was amiss. The sound of hammers ringing out against stone, merchants calling out to passers-by, and children chasing each other through the crowded streets created a cacophony that threatened to drown out the ominous rumble. You watched as Marcus, the local baker, expertly shaped a batch of focaccia bread on his wooden peel. The scent of fresh dough wafted up from the oven behind him, mingling with the acrid smell and making your stomach growl in anticipation of lunch. Marcus caught your eye and flashed you a warm smile before expertly slapping the round loaf onto the baking stone. You followed the aroma to the nearby Thermopolis, where Apuleius was brewing up a new batch of wine. The rich scent of fermented grapes mingled with the acrid smell, creating an odd yet somehow pleasant combination that made your head spin slightly. You ordered a small cup and took a sip, feeling the cool liquid wash over the dryness in your throat. As you stood there sipping your wine, the rumble grew louder still. It was then that you noticed the first wisps of ash beginning to fall from above, drifting lazily down through the air like snowflakes on a winter's night. You watched as they settled onto the cobblestones, leaving behind tiny dark patches that looked almost like spilled ink. You shook your head and returned to Apuleius for another cup, feeling a little foolish for getting caught up in the excitement of it all. After all, ash falling from above was nothing new. You'd seen it happen many times before during heavy thunderstorms. Still, there was something unsettling about this particular rumble that made you want to linger and watch. As you stood there with your cup, a young woman approached Apuleius and ordered a small quantity of olives for her family's lunch. You recognized the merchant who brought out the container from his shop nearby, Lucanus, whose wares were always fresh but often pricey due to the long journey from Sicily. The sound of haggling over prices filled the air as you watched Apuleius and Lucanus debate the merits of each other's goods. As the sun began its slow climb towards noon, casting a warm glow across the forum, the rumble grew louder still. Ash fell in greater quantity now, settling on your skin like fine powder from a painter's brush. You rubbed at it absent-mindedly with the back of your hand, feeling the grainy texture scrape against your palm. You wandered over to the nearby Agory, the public square dedicated to civic business and events, where a small crowd had gathered to watch the local magistrates discuss some new proposal or other. The air was thick with debate as voices rose in argument, though you couldn't quite catch the topic of discussion from your vantage point. As you stood there listening, feeling the weight of the world settle onto your shoulders like an unspoken expectation, a young boy approached and tugged at your hem. He asked, or rather, begged for a few coppers to buy a fresh apple from one of the nearby vendors. You hesitated momentarily before digging into your pouch and handing over a small coin. The vendor handed him a shiny red fruit with leaves still attached, which he grasped tightly in his fist as if it were a precious treasure. The boy thanked you profusely, beaming up at you with an unguarded grin that made something inside of you feel all warm and fuzzy for no particular reason other than the pure joy on his face. You smiled back at him, feeling a sudden pang of maternal affection towards this small creature who reminded you so much of yourself when you were young. The boy skipped off into the crowd with his prize clutched tightly in hand, leaving behind the faint scent of fresh apple that mingled oddly with the acrid smell drifting down from above. As you stood there watching him disappear into the throng, something caught your eye, a small stone pedestal bearing an inscription on its surface. It seemed out of place amidst all this bustle and commerce. Indeed, it looked almost as if it had been plunked down in the middle of things for some reason or other. Curious, you wandered over to investigate further. The inscription read, Sextilius Primus, a name that rang no particular bells in your mind, though you knew you'd seen many similar stones bearing dedications to local merchants and politicians throughout the city. You turned it over thoughtfully in your hand, studying its weathered surface as if searching for some hidden clue. The acrid smell still clung to everything around you. Ash fell gently from above now like snowflakes on a winter's night. But something about this small inscription left a faint tang of unease at the back of your mind. What was it exactly? You couldn't quite put your finger on what didn't feel right. All these stones and inscriptions scattered throughout Pompeii seemed so familiar in their own way. Yet there was something about Sextilius Primus' name that jarred with you like a discordant note played out of tune. You looked up to see the forum bathed in an eerie twilight glow, as if the very sun itself had been extinguished, plunging everything into a strange and unsettling half-light. Ash continued to fall in ever-increasing quantities now, not just on your skin, but all around you like some unseen presence shrouding Pompeii in its dark shadow. Something felt off-kilter within yourself. Though you couldn't quite articulate what it was or why, the air seemed thick with an unspoken expectation that hung over everything like a portent. As you stood there trying to shake off the feeling that something was amiss, a faint tremor beneath your feet seemed to underscore your unease. It started as a gentle vibration, barely perceptible, but grew in intensity until it felt like the very foundations of the city were shifting. The sound of distant voices and clanging pots gave way to an uneasy silence, as if everyone around you was holding their breath. You glanced over at Marcus, who had been working alongside his father on a nearby wall. His eyes met yours for a moment before he looked away, his expression unreadable. You knew that look, the one that said he was trying not to worry but couldn't help it. The tremors were nothing new in Pompeii. Earthquakes were an occupational hazard for people living near active volcanoes like Mount Vesuvius. Still, this felt different. You took a deep breath and focused on the task at hand, helping your mother with preparations for the upcoming festival of Volcanalia. It was going to be a grand celebration, honoring the god of fire and forge. Your family had spent hours preparing offerings and decorations. Colorful garlands of flowers and leaves adorned the walls, while the pungent scent of incense wafted through the air. Your mother busied herself in the kitchen, expertly arranging sweet pastries on a tray. She seemed oblivious to the growing unease that gripped you both. "Just a few more hours, my dear," she said with a reassuring smile as she handed you a pastry. "Then we'll take our place at the temple and offer thanks for another year of prosperity." As you munched on the still warm pastry, your thoughts drifted to the strange occurrences that had been plaguing Pompeii over the past few weeks. Cattle were said to be acting strangely, some reported seeing visions in their eyes, while others spoke of hearing eerie whispers as they grazed by the river. It was rumored that a local priestess claimed to have seen omens and portents etched into the walls of nearby caves. A faint rustling sound caught your attention. You looked up to see one of the family's servants, an elderly man named Gaius, hurrying toward you with a worried expression. "What is it?" you asked as he stopped in front of you. "It's Master Lucius," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "He was inspecting some work on the temple, and he thinks there may be something wrong." You exchanged a concerned glance with Marcus before hurrying after Gaius to join your father near the temple. As they drew closer, you could see that Master Lucius's face was pale beneath his weathered skin. "What is it?" he asked when he saw you approaching. "It looks like the earth has moved," one of the workers said hesitantly. "A new crack in the foundation." Your father rushed over to examine the damage for himself, while your mother called out from behind them to ask if everything was all right. The air seemed to vibrate with tension as everyone paused, unsure what to do next. And then, like a dark cloud gathering on the horizon, you saw it. A faint haze rising above Mount Vesuvius's slopes, not just any fog, but one that seemed almost pulsing. It was so subtle at first, but as you watched, the mist grew thicker and more agitated. The tremors beneath your feet intensified, now accompanied by low rumbles that sent shivers down your spine. In a moment of eerie silence, it dawned on everyone. This wasn't just another earthquake or tremor, something was very wrong. The sweet scent of fresh bread wafted through the narrow streets of Pompeii, carried on the gentle morning breeze that rustled the awnings above the market stalls. The smell was familiar and comforting, but it did little to alleviate the unease that had settled in everyone's stomachs after last night's earthquake. As you walked alongside the city walls, the sound of vendors calling out their daily wares, fresh fish from the sea, fresh olives for your table, mingled with the clanging of pots and pans being taken down from the rooftops. The cacophony was a stark contrast to the eerie silence that had fallen over the city just hours before. You passed by the bakery, where Marcus Aurelius, the owner, was already hard at work kneading dough on his wooden table. His hands moved deftly, as if he were conducting an invisible orchestra, while his wife helped him shape loaves into neat cylindrical shapes. The aroma of yeast and baking bread enveloped you, making your stomach growl with hunger. The sun had barely risen above the rooftops when the city's inhabitants began to emerge from their homes, bleary-eyed and yawny. Many were still shaken by the earthquake that had struck in the dead of night, causing cracks in walls and a faint rumbling beneath their feet. Some claimed it was an omen, others dismissed it as just another tremor. You watched as two men, Lucius and Gaius, made their way to the local forum, arguing over whose turn it was to take care of the public baths that day. Their voices rose in a heated discussion, with gestures becoming more animated by the minute. The surrounding crowd gathered around them, drawn in by the commotion. Nearby, at the corner stall selling fresh produce, you noticed that the usually cheerful vendor, Aurelia, seemed subdued today. Her eyes were downcast as she arranged bunches of grapes and figs on her display table. She muttered under her breath about how her husband had lost his favorite axe in the earthquake's aftermath. It was a family heirloom passed down from their grandfather. As you continued through the winding streets, you caught snippets of conversation that hinted at unease beneath the surface. Some people whispered among themselves about the temple priestess who claimed to have seen an omen on the sacred stones, a sign of impending doom for Pompeii's inhabitants. Others grumbled about the public funds being wasted on unnecessary repairs when there were more pressing concerns, like feeding their families. At the city gate, you encountered a group of merchants and traders returning from a trip to nearby towns. They carried baskets overflowing with fresh produce, grains, and olive oil, goods they had carefully loaded onto donkeys before setting off at dawn. The air was filled with the scent of exotic spices wafting from their packs. One merchant, a stout man named Lucius, boasted about his impressive hauls, but when you asked to see what he'd brought back for sale, he hesitated. "Oh, it's all still in storage," he said vaguely, glancing around nervously as if someone might be listening. You left the city gate and followed a narrow alleyway between two large stone buildings. The sound of running water grew louder with each step. You were approaching one of Pompeii's many small fountains. This particular fountain was dedicated to Neptune, god of the sea and protector of ships at anchor in nearby waters. Nearby stood an elderly man named Marcus who had been sitting on a bench for hours, watching the world go by. He stared blankly into space as if lost in thought, or perhaps he simply wanted to avoid getting involved in all the chatter about the earthquake. As you walked closer, the sound of running water filled your ears, accompanied by the soft lapping against stone and the occasional splashing from a nearby fish market. The air carried hints of dampness, saltwater, and fresh seaweed, an ever-present reminder of Pompeii's dependence on the sea for trade and sustenance. Marcus didn't stir as you approached. He was too absorbed in his thoughts to notice your presence. You noticed that his eyes were fixed on a spot near the fountain, where water spilled from a cracked stone basin into a shallow pool below. You followed Marcus, gaze down to the broken basin. It looked as though someone had recently attempted to repair it with crude cement and twisted iron bands. Water seeped through the cracks, forming tiny rivulets that trickled across the worn stone floor. The old man's eyes seemed distant as he stared at the basin. Perhaps he was thinking about something far beyond this spot, or maybe his mind wandered back to last night's earthquake. In any case, you couldn't help but wonder if anyone had actually done anything effective to address the city's structural problems after all these recent quakes. As morning slowly gave way to mid-morning, the sounds of Pompeii began to shift once more. Women started calling out from their doorways as they made breakfast for their families. Market vendors set up shop beneath colorful awnings. And at a nearby bakery, Marcus Aurelius dough rose with an inviting aroma. In this peaceful scene, it's easy to forget the earthquake that had shaken everyone just hours before, but its presence lingers like the faint scent of smoke from last night's cooking fires still clinging to your clothes. As you stand there amidst Pompeii's quiet morning bustle, you can't shake off a nagging sense that everything may not be quite right. As you wander through the streets, taking in the eerie calmness that pervades the air, your gaze falls upon a young boy, no older than 10 winters, busily tending to his family's cooking fire. The aroma of roasting meats wafts through the air, enticing your stomach and momentarily distracting you from the unsettling feeling that has been growing inside you. Your eyes linger on the boy as he expertly rotates a spit, his hands moving with a practiced ease that belies his tender age. You can almost hear the chatter of his family, gathered around him in anticipation of their midday meal, when suddenly a snippet of conversation catches your ear. "I can't believe they're burning so much food," someone says, their voice low but carrying on the still morning air. You turn to face the speaker, a grizzled old man leaning against a nearby wall, eyeing the boy with a mixture of disgust and frustration. You recognize him as Marcus, one of Pompeii's elder citizens, known for his sharp tongue and even sharper wit. As you watch, a middle-aged woman approaches Marcus, her expression apologetic but firm. "Marcus, don't be so quick to judge," she says. "These are uncertain times. We can ill afford to waste any resources." Marcus scowls, crossing his arms over his chest. "But think of the food. They're burning entire sides of meat just like that without even finishing them off." The woman sighs patiently. "Come now, Marcus. You know as well as I do why they did it. The earthquakes, and then the tremors last night. People are spooked." You sense a tension in her words, one that you can't quite place. It's almost as if she's holding something back. A commotion erupts nearby, drawing your attention to a group of vendors arguing over a recent shipment of goods from Rome. One of them is gesturing animatedly towards the forum, where a makeshift market has been set up in response to the crisis. As you make your way through the crowd, trying to get closer to hear their conversation, a young servant rushes past you, carrying a large basket filled with what looks like freshly baked bread. The aroma wafts after her, and for an instant, it's almost enough to dispel the creeping sense of unease that has been building inside you. But then you catch sight of something else, a group of people huddled together in a corner of the forum, their faces pale and worried. They glance around nervously as if they're sharing some secret, but your attention is drawn to one figure standing apart from them, an elderly priestess, her eyes fixed intently on the ground. As you watch, she begins to murmur something under her breath, a low chant that sends shivers down your spine. The air around her seems to grow heavier, and for a moment it feels like time itself has slowed. Suddenly, the servant who had passed by earlier reappears at your side, holding out a small loaf of bread and whispering urgently in your ear, "Please, take this. It's from my mistress. She insists you eat something." You hesitate, unsure what to make of her words or the strange atmosphere that has settled over Pompeii. And then, just as you're about to turn away, another tremor strikes, a minor one, but enough to send a shiver through the air. The servant's eyes flick towards it, and for an instant you see something there, a flash of fear or unease. It disappears almost instantly, replaced by her usual calm demeanor. But not before you catch the glimmer of something else in her gaze, a fleeting sense that she knows more than she should about what is happening here. With the tremor still echoing through the air, you feel the familiar tug on your sleeve. It's your guide, urging you to move forward. You take a deep breath and press on into Pompeii's morning bustle, unsure where this journey will lead or what secrets lie hidden beneath its surface. The scent of baking bread wafts through the air, carrying with it the promise of a new day. You've been walking for hours, and your stomach growls in anticipation as you make your way through Pompeii's narrow streets. As you turn onto Via Marina, the sound of vendors calling out their wares grows louder. Fresh fish, fresh bread, the smell of saltwater and baking dough is almost intoxicating. You quicken your pace to keep up with a group of women carrying baskets of freshly baked loaves on their heads. You weave through the crowd, trying not to get too close to the vendors as they expertly juggle goods and customers. Some Pompeii residents nod in greeting, others barely acknowledge you at all, busy as they are getting about their day. A faint scent of olives greets your nose, carried on a gentle breeze that stirs the nearby awnings. You take another deep breath, savoring the mix of smells, fish and bread and olives, all intertwined with the city's own unique blend of sweat and dust. You've been to Pompeii before, you know its rhythms, its sounds, and its smells. Still, it never fails to surprise you how busy this small town can get in the morning. You've been walking for hours already, but there's still so much to explore. Your feet carry you along the Via Marina, past the public fountain where a group of children are playing with their buckets and jugs, trying to collect as much water as possible without spilling a drop. The sound of clinking pottery and laughing children adds to the morning chaos. You continue on, passing beneath the archway that marks the entrance to the city's forum. A small group of townspeople have gathered near the fountain, discussing something in hushed tones, no doubt about the latest gossip or news from Rome. As you approach the forum, a commotion breaks out nearby. A man is arguing with one of the market vendors over what appears to be a disputed weight on some fresh produce. The vendor is adamant that he's being shortchanged. The customer insists it's his right and the law behind him not to pay more than he owes. You watch for a moment, feeling a twinge of recognition at this familiar scene from any Roman market town. An argument over commerce with both parties unwilling to back down. It seems that some things never change. A nearby bakery beckons you in with its enticing aromas and the promise of something fresh out of the oven, perhaps even still warm for breakfast. You feel a sudden pang of hunger as your stomach growls louder than before. Inside the bakery, you take a seat at one end of a wooden counter, watching as bakers expertly shape dough into perfect little loaves. The sound of kneading and shaping is almost soothing in its rhythmic repetition, a steady heartbeat for this tiny shop. Your eyes wander to an old fresco on the wall above the counter, a faded scene depicting a group of mythological creatures frolicking through the countryside, completely oblivious to any potential volcanic eruptions. The colors have long since dulled with age and sun exposure, yet something about it still seems off, if only slightly. You point out the fresco to one of the bakers, who nods thoughtfully as they continue shaping dough into perfect little balls. Ah, yes, they say quietly, their voice barely audible above the constant noise of kneading and chatter in the background. We've been meaning to touch it up for a while now, but you know how these things get left by the wayside. You nod sympathetically as the baker hands you a warm loaf wrapped in a linen cloth. For all your travels through Pompeii's winding streets, this small bakery on Via Marina holds a special place in your heart. Its warmth and comfort are like an old friend waiting just around the corner. The scent of baking bread still lingers, mingling with the city smells as you take another bite, feeling grateful for this small taste of home. As you finish your breakfast, the sounds of the bakery begin to fade into the background as the morning bustle of Via Marina takes over. The sun is rising higher in the sky, casting a warm glow over the streets and buildings. You feel invigorated after a good night's rest, and the taste of fresh bread still lingers on your tongue. You decide it's time to get moving, knowing you have a long day ahead of you. Your stomach rumbling with hunger, you set off towards the forum, eager to meet up with Marcus and discuss the project he's been working on. The fresco is starting to take shape in your mind, but there are still so many questions unanswered. As you walk through the streets, you can't help but notice the sense of unease that hangs over the city like a cloud. Rumors have been circulating about increased seismic activity and tremors, but no one seems too concerned. After all, Pompeii has stood for centuries without incident. You arrive at Marcus's workshop just as he's finishing up some final touches on a new fresco panel. He greets you warmly, his eyes lighting up with enthusiasm as he shows off his handiwork. You're impressed by the level of detail and craftsmanship that goes into each piece. Marcus is truly an artist. The two of you sit down to discuss the project, poring over sketches and notes as you go through your plans for the next few days. The focus on the fresco's central theme is starting to take shape in your mind. A depiction of Bacchus, god of wine and fertility, surrounded by lush foliage and symbols of abundance. As you work, you hear footsteps approaching from outside. It's one of Marcus's assistants, Lucius, with some news that catches him off guard. Marcus, I'm afraid there's been another tremor in the region, he says gravely. The magistrates are getting worried. They're calling an emergency meeting to discuss what measures should be taken. Marcus exchanges a concerned glance with you before turning back to Lucius. Tell them we'll send someone over as soon as possible, he says, his voice firm but laced with worry. As the two of you pack up your things and prepare to head towards the forum, you can't help but feel a sense of unease creeping in. The tremors are starting to get more frequent, and it's hard not to wonder if there's something more at play here, perhaps an omen from the gods that they're trying to warn them about. You join the growing crowd on Via Marina as you make your way towards the forum, where the meeting is being held. The streets are filled with murmurs of concern and speculation. Everyone seems to be talking about nothing but the tremors. Upon arriving at the forum, you take a seat alongside Marcus among the gathered officials, watching as they discuss their options for addressing the situation. Some advocate for emergency evacuations, while others insist that there's no need for panic yet. You can't help but feel a sense of disconnection from these events unfolding around you. It seems like everyone is focused on the immediate crisis at hand, without stopping to think about what might be causing it in the first place. The tremors are starting to make you realize just how precarious their existence here really is. As the meeting draws to a close and the officials begin dispersing, Marcus leans over to whisper something in your ear. "I've got an idea. I want us to take a closer look at those frescoes that were recently uncovered on Mount Vesuvius. Maybe there's some hidden meaning or symbolism we can tap into." You exchange a knowing glance with him before nodding your head in agreement. The mystery of the forgotten fresco is starting to reveal itself, and you're eager to unravel its secrets. As you leave the forum behind and set off towards Mount Vesuvius, you feel a shiver run down your spine. It's as if the very earth beneath their feet has started to shift into motion, carrying them ever closer to an unknown fate. As you walk alongside the winding road that leads to Mount Vesuvius, the silence is almost palpable. The sky above seems to be watching your every step, as if it too senses the unease that's building within you. You quicken your pace, eager to reach the foot of the volcano and begin your ascent. The air grows thick with an otherworldly energy, like the hum of a harp string about to shatter. As you climb higher, the landscape transforms around you. The lush greenery of the surrounding hills gives way to rocks and scree, which in turn yield to volcanic ash and pumice. You can smell the acrid tang of sulfur on your skin, carried by an invisible breeze that seems to mock you with its gentle caress. Every step feels deliberate, as if each movement is a test of wills against some unseen force that's urging you upward. Your heart beats in time with the distant rumble of Vesuvius' slumbering power, growing louder with every passing moment. You begin to wonder if this ascent has been ordained by fate itself. Your destination nears, an ancient fresco hidden within a long-abandoned temple at the volcano's base. Legend speaks of it as the tombstone of the forgotten, where an enigmatic priestess once rendered murals that foretold of calamity and rebirth. You feel drawn to this mysterious artwork, sensing that its secrets hold the key to unraveling the tangled threads of Pompeii's impending doom. At last you reach the temple's entrance, a colossal stone facade cloaked in vines and moss, with eyes carved into the keystone above. The air inside is stale, heavy with dust and forgotten memories. As your gaze roams across the frescoes that adorn the walls, you notice something peculiar. One panel appears different from the others. A single figure stands apart from the crowd of revelers depicted in vibrant hues, a lone silhouette cast against a dark sky, eyes upturned as if toward some celestial event yet to come. You recognize this image. It's an echo of the forum scene where you witnessed people caught off guard by something unseen. Here, too, they seem frozen in anticipation. You feel your mind grasp for connections between these two disparate scenes, one set amidst market stalls and temples, while this fresco lies deep within a volcano's shadow. Each piece of evidence points toward some great cataclysm, but the specifics elude you still. As you study the frescoes with growing intensity, a faint tremor starts to emanate from beneath your feet. The earth begins its relentless motion, each step and shudder synchronizing with the beat in your chest. You feel it, an unshakable certainty that time itself has become distorted around Pompeii, where every event seems interconnected. You sense that you've stumbled into a realm beyond mortal comprehension, one governed by forces both ancient and unfathomable. Your quest to unravel this mystery assumes new proportions with each passing moment. What lies hidden within the temple's frescoes? What cataclysmic events do these artworks foreshadow? The tremors grow stronger now, an almost palpable drumbeat that synchronizes your breathing with the beat of Vesuvius' ancient core. Every fiber in you screams to uncover this long-lost truth, even as a shiver runs down your spine at what might be revealed. You realize that time is running out. Each step closer to understanding also brings Pompeii one step closer to its fate, an eruption yet unknown when last we left the city's busy streets, oblivious of impending disaster. Now you've reached another threshold within this tale, where curiosity and foreboding collide in a dance with destiny. The sweet scent of wood smoke wafts through the air, carrying with it the promise of a warm breakfast on this chilly morning in Pompeii. You've reached another threshold within this tale, where curiosity and foreboding collide in a dance with destiny. As you breathe in deeply, the acrid tang of ash mingles with the comforting aroma of cooking food, making your stomach growl with anticipation. The day stretches out before you like an empty canvas, waiting to be filled with the mundane rhythms of daily life. You stand at the edge of your kitchen, feet sinking into the cool tiles as you watch Marcus, the baker's son, expertly flip a pancake on the griddle. His dark hair is mussed from sleep, and his eyes are still heavy-lidded from the early morning hours spent kneading dough in the bakery. The light streaming through the windows casts a warm glow over the scene, illuminating the faint smudge of flour dusting Marcus's cheek. As you watch, he carefully pours a small amount of honey onto one half of the pancake, creating a sticky pool that glistens like golden syrup. You can almost smell the sweetness wafting up from the griddle, mingling with the savory aroma of freshly baked bread rising in the background. The air is thick with the scent of cooking food, making your mouth water in anticipation. Marcus slides the pancake onto a plate and hands it to you, his eyes sparkling with mischief as he says, "Try this one first." You take a bite and the flavors explode on your tongue, sweet honey, tangy fruit preserves, and the subtle richness of freshly baked bread. It's a taste that never fails to bring a smile to your face. As you eat, you notice the faint smell of smoke carrying on the breeze outside. At first, it's just a hint, almost imperceptible, but as the morning wears on, the scent grows stronger, becoming harder to ignore. You glance out the window, watching as wispy tendrils of cloud drift lazily across the sky. The sound of clinking dishes and low conversation carries from next door, where your neighbor, Aurelia, is no doubt preparing breakfast for her family. Her husband, Lucius, a stern-faced man with a gruff demeanor, often complains about the early morning noise levels in their neighborhood, but you've never seen him intervene or try to quiet things down. Marcus notices your gaze and leans against the counter, his eyes following yours as they drift out the window. Smoke's been getting worse, he says matter-of-factly, his voice low and soothing. Must be something burning on the mountain. He shrugs, a habitual gesture that suggests an acceptance of things beyond their control. You finish your breakfast, feeling a sense of satisfaction wash over you as the morning sun casts its gentle light through the windows. The air is alive with possibility. Anything can happen in this new day, and yet. Oh, and yet, as you step outside into the crisp morning air, the scent of smoke envelops you like a shroud. It's no longer just a hint or a whisper. Now it's a thick blanket that clings to your skin and clothes. You breathe deeply, feeling the particles dance on your tongue as you try to make sense of this new development. Marcus follows close behind, his eyes scanning the horizon with an air of unease. "Think we should go check it out?" he asks hesitantly, but before either of you can respond, a faint rumble echoes through the valley, low at first, but growing in intensity as it builds towards something. You pause mid-step, your heart beating just slightly faster than normal. "What is that sound?" As you stand there frozen in uncertainty, the rumble grows louder and begins to take on a rhythmic quality, like thunder crashing against the valley's walls. You glance up at your companion, whose eyes are fixed intently on some point beyond your shoulder. His brow is furrowed, his mouth set in a determined line. "What do you think it means?" he asks, his voice barely above a whisper, as if he fears being overheard by unseen ears. You shrug, feeling the weight of uncertainty settle around your shoulders like a shroud. You've lived here all your life, and this valley has always been a place of relative peace, where the sounds of nature, birdsong, babbling brooks, rustling leaves, have lulled you to sleep at night. But now there's something else. As if in response to your unspoken question, another sound joins the growing rumble, a low, ominous hiss that seems to seep from the very earth itself. You feel it vibrating through your feet, making the soles of your sandals tremble with an otherworldly energy. Your companion takes a step forward, his eyes scanning the horizon as if searching for some sign or explanation for this sudden cacophony. "I think we should be careful," he says finally, his voice firm but laced with a hint of unease. "If it's something natural, an earthquake or landslide, who knows what could happen?" You nod in agreement, though your mind is racing with darker possibilities. You've heard stories of distant lands being ravaged by fire and brimstone, of mountains spewing forth molten rock that incinerates everything in its path. But you try to push those thoughts aside. This valley's been here for centuries. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. Besides, what are the chances? The rumble grows louder still, making it hard to think straight. You raise a hand, gesturing to your companion that perhaps they should wait, see if whatever is causing this commotion passes. And then, in an instant, everything changes. A column of smoke appears on the horizon, billowing up from some point beyond the nearby hill crest like a living entity. It's massive and dark, churning with a fury you've never seen before. You feel its heat even now, it stings your eyes, makes them water in protest. You take another step back, involuntarily recoiling as if burned by an invisible flame. Your companion reaches out to grab your arm, his grip firm but not unkind. "What is that?" you whisper, hardly daring to speak the words aloud. The smoke continues its ascent, twisting and writhing like a tortured animal. It's starting to take on shapes, wispy tendrils curl around nearby trees, as if ensnaring them in an unseen grasp. You feel your heart racing faster now, pounding out a frantic rhythm against your ribs. As you watch, transfixed with horror, the first flames begin to lick at the sky. They're faint and yellow at first, just tiny sparks dancing within the smoke's maw, but they spread fast, spreading tendrils of orange that seem almost organically alive. Your mind stumbles over itself as it tries to comprehend what you're seeing. Fire that moves on its own, fed by some unseen force. You feel a primal scream building inside your chest, threatening to shatter the fragile calm of this moment. You know deep in your bones that everything is about to change. The world will never be the same again. We need to get out of here, you gasp, turning towards the safety of the nearby hillside, away from the inferno spreading its dark wings across the valley below. But as you stumble forward, something stops you in your tracks, a tiny voice whispering urgently within your mind. What if it follows us? What if we can't escape? And with that cold thought seeping into your soul like an icy draft on a winter's night, you pause. As you stand there, frozen in indecision, the voice within your mind grows louder, a nagging whisper that refuses to be silenced. You try to shake it off, telling yourself you're being foolish. What's the likelihood of it following you? But the words linger, taking root like seeds sown on fertile soil. The sun beats down upon your back, warming the cool mist from last night's rain into a gentle sweat that trickles beneath your tunic. You squint towards the valley below, where wispy clouds cling to the slopes like lost spirits. The air is heavy with an otherworldly stillness, as if all of nature holds its breath in anticipation. Your gaze drifts to the distant outline of Vesuvius, her majesty's grandeur softened by morning haze. She stands watch over Pompeii, sentinel-like and serene, yet radiating a subtle menace that makes your skin prickle with unease. You recall the countless times you've stood at this very spot, watching the volcano's slopes tremble ever so slightly as if awakening from some ancient slumber. Your heart begins to beat faster now, its rhythm quickened by an unspoken fear. What if it follows us? No, no, that can't be right. You laugh out loud at your own absurdity, shaking off the trepidation like a leaf dropping from autumn's grasp. Vesuvius is just a mountain, an unpredictable force of nature to be sure, but nothing more. You take another step forward, and with each movement, the voice within grows quieter, its urgent whisper dwindling into the background din of your mind. Your resolve hardens, you won't let fear dictate your actions. You can face this day like any other in Pompeii, a bustling marketplace, vendors hawking their wares beneath the clear blue sky. But as you quicken your pace towards town, a familiar scent wafts up from the valley below, acrid and pungent, carrying an undercurrent of damp earth. Your nose wrinkles in distaste. It's the smell of smoldering embers and burnt offerings. You recall the night before, when the priests had performed their nocturnal rites atop Vesuvius slopes. You continue your ascent into Pompeii's heart, passing beneath market stalls that now display an array of fresh produce. Pyramids of grapes from nearby vineyards, baskets overflowing with sprightly fennel and fragrant rosemary. The morning air is heavy with the scent of baking bread wafting from the ovens in the forum. You hail a friendly vendor as you pass by his stall, exchanging pleasantries about the day's prospects for rain or not. Your mind starts to unwind, focusing on more mundane concerns, like finding time to prepare breakfast this morning. Every step closer to town brings the promise of hot food and good company, exactly what you need after last night's adventures. The narrow alleys open up into larger streets as you near your destination, a small apartment above a bakery, nestled in one of Pompeii's more modest neighborhoods. Smoke drifts lazily from the ovens below, mingling with the sounds of early morning, hammering on metal the sweet scent of baking pastries. You push through the crowded marketplace, exchanging nods and waves with familiar faces, your neighbors, local shopkeepers, even a few fellow soldiers like yourself who have seen duty. Your stomach growls in anticipation as you climb up to the bakery's second-story apartment. Ah, yes. Now this is what I needed. Your landlady Gaius mother greets you warmly from within, an older woman with kind eyes and an unyielding grip on your arm, dispensing the morning rituals. A quick breakfast of bread, olives, and smoked fish. You hesitate for a moment before accepting her offering. It's not quite what you'd call breakfast food, but in this part of Pompeii, after dark streets and a strange encounter, even smoked fish has an appeal. As Gaius' mother busies herself with preparing the day's breakfast, inhaling smoke from last night's leftovers you find yourself momentarily distracted by your own thoughts, Vesuvius looming in the distance, that voice within whispering its unsettling questions. You push them aside, letting her warm hospitality envelop you like a cloak. Your stomach growls louder now as she hands over the makeshift meal on an earthenware plate, accompanied by a generous wedge of flatbread from last night's baking batch. A mouthful later and your hunger is momentarily sated, yet beneath its surface lies a disquieting sense, that nagging feeling. The acrid smell of burning garbage wafts through the air, carried on a lazy breeze that stirs the dust motes dancing near the torches lighting the narrow streets of Pompeii. It's a familiar scent, one you've grown accustomed to over the years, the sweet tang of smoke and ash, mingling with the pungent aroma of yesterday's fish market. As you make your way through the crowded thoroughfares, the sounds of daily life envelop you. Merchants hawking their wares, children arguing in shrill tones, and the clanging of pots as cooks prepare meals for the day. The air is thick with the smell of cooking oil and fresh bread wafting from the nearby bakery. You pause to watch a group of slaves expertly juggling bundles of reeds, while chatting with their mistress about the upcoming festival honoring Vulcan, patron deity of fire and metalwork. Their laughter carries on the breeze as they exchange jests about whose turn it is to don the ridiculous costume for the procession. The sound of hammers ringing out from nearby workshops adds a steady heartbeat to the cacophony. Your stomach growls in anticipation of lunch, reminding you that you've been meaning to stop by the Thermopolis near the Forum for some hot soup and bread. As you navigate through the throngs, your feet lead you instinctively towards the familiar sounds of the merchant stalls, the clinking of coins against metal scales, the calls of fresh fish. Fresh meat from competing vendors. A sudden gust stirs up a cloud of dust, causing nearby traders to squint and cough. You duck into an alleyway between two shops, seeking refuge from the brief storm. The narrow passageway is dimly lit, with only slivers of sunlight piercing through gaps in the buildings above. As you pause to collect your thoughts, you notice a small inscription on a stone embedded in one wall, Vesuvius tremors, signs and portents for those who would heed them. Your attention lingers on this peculiar message as you ponder its meaning. Perhaps it's just an overzealous merchant trying to capitalize on people's fear of the mountain looming above Pompeii. Or maybe, just maybe, there's some hidden truth in these cryptic words. As your mind wanders back to the task at hand, finding that Thermopolis and perhaps purchasing a flask of wine for later, you're interrupted by a faint rumble from higher up. You glance upwards to see dark clouds gathering above Vesuvius Peak, their anvil-shaped heads stretching across the sky like bruised fists. Vendors nearby begin packing away their goods as whispers start circulating about potential storms brewing on the mountain. A sense of unease settles over you, though it's hard to pinpoint why. Perhaps it's just the residue from that uneasy feeling earlier about being shortchanged by the local baker. After a series of brief stops at various stalls, you finally arrive at your favorite Thermopolis near the Forum. The owner greets you warmly and begins expertly assembling a bowl of steaming vegetables with some crusty bread on the side, just as you had hoped. A customer nearby starts arguing with the seller about an overpriced jug of wine, bringing up their usual refrain. "You're taking me for a ride, Lucius. I've seen better deals at Marcus' shop down by the harbor." The exchange becomes heated enough to attract attention from nearby onlookers. Your own appetite momentarily distracted by this spectacle, you focus back on your meal. As you take a bite of that warm bread, its gentle crust giving way beneath your teeth like a promise kept, you feel an odd sense of detachment wash over you. It's not just the argument raging next door or even the distant rumble from Vesuvius. Something else is lurking in the shadows, and for now it remains shrouded. The sun begins its slow descent towards the horizon as day gives way to dusk. The sky above Pompeii deepens into hues of crimson and gold, painting a breathtaking backdrop against which the nearby streets transform. Oil lamps begin lighting up windowsills, while candelabras are lit on doorways to guide weary travelers home. With belly full and senses somewhat restored, you decide it's high time for your daily stroll through the nearby gardens. As you wander along pathways overgrown with vines and shrubs, listening to the evening song of cicadas serenading Pompeii from its lush periphery, a soothing melody punctuated by the occasional chirp or faint barking in the distance, something about this place feels more like home. Vines curl around nearby wooden fences as you make your way towards a particularly tranquil corner, where an old man with wispy gray hair sits cross-legged on a stone bench. He watches the sun dip below the horizon with eyes filled with quiet contemplation, lost in thought. Time itself seems to slow down for this elderly resident of Pompeii, his face creased by countless years lived under Vesuvius' looming shadow, listening for subtle tremors beneath his feet that speak of impending storms and whispers from above. Perhaps he's heard the rumors circulating about increased earthquakes and fires, perhaps not. The distant rumble from Vesuvius grows louder now as dusk wears on into full-fledged evening, a sound you can almost feel in your chest, like the pulsing beat of an ancient drum warning all who would listen. Pay attention to these signs. As I stood on my doorstep, gazing out into the flickering orange glow of the evening sky, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was amiss. The distant rumble had grown to a low roar now, and I could feel its vibrations beneath my feet like an ominous heartbeat. Vesuvius, that ancient sentinel perched on the horizon, seemed to be stirring from her slumber, warning all who would listen of impending doom. I pushed aside the fluttering curtains of our modest domus and stepped out into the evening air, taking a deep breath as I scanned the rooftops for any signs of panic. But Pompeii's streets were quiet tonight, bathed in the warm orange light of torches and lanterns that cast long shadows across the cobblestones. My thoughts strayed to my husband, Lucius, who was still out on his rounds as a scribe for the town council. He had always been attuned to the workings of Vesuvius' moods, studying her every tremor and rumble with an almost fanatical intensity. I often joked that he had developed a sixth sense for sensing the volcano's warnings, but tonight, even I couldn't help feeling a shiver run down my spine as the sound grew louder. As if drawn by some unseen force, I found myself walking towards the forum, where the town's officials were no doubt huddled in urgent discussion. The air was thick with the scent of roasting meats and fresh bread wafting from the nearby Thermopolis, but tonight it seemed to mask a more ominous aroma, smoke. My heart quickened as I pushed through the crowds gathering near the forum, their faces aglow with worry etched on every forehead. Old Marcus Gracchus was standing tall amidst them, his eyes fixed intently on some distant horizon point. He spotted me and beckoned me over with a gnarled finger. "What is it, Lucius?" he asked when I reached him, but of course that wasn't who had summoned me, just a fellow townsman who shared our name. "Vesuvius stirs," old Marcus muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "We must prepare for the worst." His words hung in the air like an unspoken threat as we exchanged worried glances with the other onlookers. Some were already packing up their belongings and making preparations to leave, while others stood rooted in place, frozen by fear. As I listened intently to old Marcus' hushed warnings of rumblings and tremors growing stronger each passing hour, a faint cry went up from one of our neighbors. "The gods send us omens." Her eyes were wide with terror as she clutched at the shoulder of her young son, who whimpered in distress. "It's true," old Marcus whispered back to me. "Some see signs, earthquakes and fires that never come to pass. But we must not ignore these warning signs." Yet even he seemed uncertain now, his brow furrowed as if wrestling with some unseen doubt. I tried to reassure him, telling myself it was merely Vesuvius' usual game of cat and mouse, announcing her presence only to retreat once more into silence. But that feeling, a shiver at the nape of my neck, and an unshakable sense that something awful loomed over us like an unseen menace, refused to subside. I glanced up towards Vesuvius, looming mass on our left flank where her slope rose steeply into darkness. Shadows danced upon its sides as if trying to convey a message. As the rumbling grew louder and more insistent, we seemed suspended in time itself, unable to move forward or backward from this moment of crisis. Were these warning signs truly meaningful? Was Vesuvius merely stirring herself up for another round of theatrics? Or was it something far more sinister brewing beneath our feet, a catastrophe that would shake the very foundations of Pompeii forever? The forum erupted into chaos as people began shouting questions and spreading rumors. Were we to evacuate or stay put? Should priests be summoned to perform rituals and placate the gods? Amidst this whirlwind, I felt disoriented and unsure what path to take. I remembered Lucius' words from days past when he spoke about his research on Vesuvius. He had talked of a unique combination of seismic activity and volcanic gas emissions that signaled an eruption was imminent, something that could be seen only in the eyes of those attuned to such signs. Was it mere superstition or genuine science? And if we were indeed facing disaster, did anyone truly know how to respond? As night began its slow descent upon Pompeii, casting long shadows across our streets and into my heart, I felt increasingly isolated. Panic threatened to consume me as the air grew thick with smoke from burning buildings, while Vesuvius loomed darkly on our horizon like an unseen specter. What lay ahead? Only time would tell. The scent of laurel and olive oil wafts through the air, carrying with it the faint hint of sweat and worn leather. You're standing near the entrance of the Forum Baths, one of Pompeii's most popular gathering spots for both locals and travelers alike. As you breathe in, the cool morning air fills your lungs, a welcome respite from the heat that will soon descend upon the city like a physical entity. The sound of gentle chatter and the soft clinking of pots and pans carries on the breeze, mingling with the smell of roasting meats wafting from nearby food stalls. You notice the weight of the sun beating down on your skin, even at this early hour. The sky above is a pale blue, slowly giving way to a brightening glow that promises another sweltering day in Pompeii's Mediterranean climate. To your left stands the imposing structure of the baths themselves, a sprawling complex of marble floors and ornate tilework, where patrons come to soak away their worries and indulge in the finer things in life. The entranceway is flanked by two stone statues, their weathered faces stern but benevolent as they watch over the comings and goings. You take your time approaching the baths, pausing to observe a group of elderly women gathered near the water clock, engaged in heated discussion about the latest shipment of imported Egyptian grain. Their raised voices carry above the din of the surrounding chatter, causing you to wince slightly as they bicker over the price per amphora. Their words are laced with the familiar cadence of argumentative Pompeian dialect, a rhythm that's both comical and infuriating in equal measure. You've heard it countless times before from friends and family members alike, phrases like "I paid less for my own grain last year," or "What nonsense, I'm sure they're charging us fair prices this time." Their banter is interrupted by the arrival of a nearby scribe, who interrupts their conversation to collect tolls from passing patrons. He scribbles away with practiced ease on his wax tablet, no doubt recording transactions in neat columns for the city's records. As you watch him work, your gaze drifts across the surrounding area, taking in the scattered clusters of people lounging about, some sipping wine or enjoying a light snack from nearby food stalls. You notice the smell of baking bread wafting through the air, carried by an elderly woman who passes by with a steaming tray balanced precariously on her head. The aroma is intoxicating, warm and inviting as it rises into your nostrils like a gentle cloud. It's a sensation you've experienced countless times before in Pompeii. That mix of bread and olive oil wafting through the air, filling your senses with an unspoken promise of comfort and sustenance to come. Your attention is drawn back to the group near the water clock as one of them, a stout woman named Lucilla, breaks away from the argumentative circle to offer you a brief greeting. Her eyes sparkle with warmth as she asks after your well-being, her voice tinged with genuine concern for those around her. You exchange pleasantries and engage in some light chatter about the recent arrival of new produce shipments at the local market. The conversation flows easily enough, but beneath its surface lies an undertone of small-town politics, whispers of dissent among the city's governing classes, murmurs of discontent from those affected by the latest trade agreements. For now, though, you prefer to focus on more mundane concerns, like the itch between your shoulder blades that needs scratching, or the weight of your own tiredness as another sweltering day unfolds in Pompeii's oppressive heat. You make a mental note to seek out some fresh water later, possibly even stop by the nearby Thermopolis for a quick drink and snack while you're at it. The thought sends your stomach growling with anticipation, reminding you that even on days like this, when politics and petty squabbles seem to dominate every conversation, the simple pleasures of life still manage to find their way into one's awareness. As the morning wears on, or rather, slowly succumbs to the inevitability of afternoon sunbeams seeping through the city streets, you continue your leisurely stroll around the Forum baths, taking in the sights and sounds as people from all walks of life go about their daily routines. Shopkeepers hawking wares, merchants conducting transactions with various degrees of efficiency or acrimony. Every interaction carries its own inherent rhythm, like a symphony conducted by the unpredictable cadence of human conversation itself, often jarring yet occasionally sublime in its effect. Even on days when tensions run high and disagreements simmer just below the surface, there's always something to be found in Pompeii that speaks directly to one's senses, an aroma wafting through the air, a child laughing loudly nearby, oblivious to adult concerns, or even the quiet satisfaction of putting your own weight down onto a cool marble seat after hours on your feet. You notice as you pause near the entranceway that the sun is now beating down with increasing ferocity, casting long shadows across the surrounding buildings and imbuing everything with an air of anticipation. As if sensing this shift in atmosphere, people begin to adjust their schedules accordingly, some ducking into nearby market stalls for shade, others making a beeline for the cool recesses of the baths themselves. It's almost as though everyone senses, or rather intuitively feels, that today might prove different. Yet whenever you ask yourself what that difference will entail, the question hangs in midair like an unspoken promise. What indeed lies ahead? As I stepped into the cool recesses of the baths themselves, the sounds of the bustling forum faded away, replaced by the soothing hum of conversation and the gentle lapping of water against stone. The air was thick with the scent of olive oil and sweat, a familiar aroma that signaled the start of my daily routine. I had arrived at the baths early, as I always did, to secure a spot near one of the smaller pools. It was here that I could best enjoy the peaceful atmosphere, away from the raucous crowds that typically filled the main halls. As I settled into my favorite stool by the pool's edge, I couldn't help but feel a sense of detachment wash over me. The others who joined me at this hour were an eclectic group, a retired merchant or two, their graying hair and lined faces testaments to years spent navigating the turbulent waters of commerce, a pair of young women chattering excitedly as they prepared for what promised to be a long day ahead. The atmosphere was relaxed, almost languid, with only the occasional burst of laughter shattering the calm. As I immersed my hands in the cool water, feeling its gentle caress ease the tension from my shoulders, I found myself pondering the unspoken question that hung over us all like an unseen shadow. What indeed lay ahead? The day seemed to stretch out before me with a promise of normalcy. Market day would bring its usual assortment of goods and gossip, perhaps even a rare opportunity for socializing at one of the local taverns. Yet, as I glanced around at my fellow bathers, I detected an almost imperceptible nervousness in their movements. It was not just me who felt it either. A quiet hum of anxiety seemed to permeate the air, like the faint buzzing of a fly hovering on the edge of perception. No one mentioned it aloud. What use would there be? But I sensed that we were all aware of some disturbance, for want of a better word. The retired merchant who sat beside me, his eyes closed as he breathed in deeply through his nose, suddenly opened them with a faint glint in their depths. He glanced around the room before fixing me with an almost imperceptible nod. It was barely more than a twitch, and I realized that we were both thinking along similar lines. The women who had joined us earlier were now chattering about the upcoming festival of Vulcan, its arrival heralded by rumors of fresh omens and portents. Their words trailed off as they noticed my gaze lingering on them, their eyes darting nervously towards the older men sitting nearby. For a moment, I thought I detected a flicker of unease, almost fear. Oh, but it vanished in an instant. Perhaps it was just the heat or my imagination running wild, for there was no concrete reason to suspect anything out of the ordinary would occur today. Still, as we made our way towards the changing rooms, now that our time by the pool had drawn to a close, I couldn't shake off the feeling that this day, unassuming and mundane though it seemed on the surface, might yet prove unforgettable in ways none of us could begin to imagine. The corridors leading out of the baths were narrow and winding, echoing with the sound of footsteps as we made our way towards the adjacent market stalls. We navigated through a maze of awnings and vendors' displays, dodging baskets of fresh produce and bunches of dried herbs on sale for medicinal purposes. At this time in the morning, before the crowds had fully awakened from their slumber, I often enjoyed an idyllic stroll past the various shops that lined our streets, watching artisans at work, exchanging pleasantries with shopkeepers who stood proudly behind their wares. This would prove a gentle way to ease into the day's activities. The sun climbed higher in the sky now, casting long shadows across the cobblestones as I continued on my leisurely walk towards the forum. There was no particular destination in mind, merely an aimless meandering through the familiar streets of Pompeii, allowing myself time to soak up the sights and sounds that filled our daily lives. And yet, even this sense of carefree wandering felt tinged with an undercurrent of unease now, a feeling I couldn't quite articulate or shake. It lingered at the periphery of my awareness like a stray thread on the edge of a tapestry, refusing to be ignored. As we emerged from the narrow passageway that led into the forum's central square, the full weight of reality crashed back down upon me. There was no escaping this city with its intricate web of lives and stories. It would unfold as always until something intervened. A feeling began creeping over me like autumn leaves rustling to life underfoot. The scent of damp earth and baking bread wafted through the air, mingling with the smell of smoke from the nearby kitchen fire. It was a familiar aroma, one that always seemed to accompany the feeling of coming home on a drizzly afternoon like this. You are walking down the narrow streets of Pompeii, your feet making soft, squelching sounds in the wet cobblestones as you navigate through the crowded marketplace. The smell of fresh bread and olive oil mingles with the sound of merchants hawking their wares, pots clanging against each other, vendors calling out to passers-by, and children's laughter carrying on the wind. As you make your way through the throngs of people, you notice a group gathered near the forum. They seem to be watching something with great interest, but you can't quite see what it is. You push your way through the crowd, your arms raised slightly to keep yourself clear of the overhanging awnings. The group parts as you approach, revealing a sight that's both mundane and fascinating: an elderly man, Quintus Cornelius by name, who has been digging up his neighbor's ashes from yesterday's burial. The ashes are still warm, radiating a faint heat into the cool afternoon air. You can see the outline of the wooden coffin beneath the freshly turned earth. Quintus is muttering to himself as he carefully digs out the remains, his wrinkled hands working with practiced ease amidst the damp soil and crumbling wood shavings. His face creases with concentration, but it's clear he's not just thinking about the task at hand. There's a sense of satisfaction in every motion, like he's reclaiming something precious. You watch for a while as Quintus works on, your eyes tracing the patterns etched into the stone walls nearby. They're intricate carvings, telling stories of long-forgotten battles and mythological creatures that seem to have little bearing on everyday life here in Pompeii. The same pattern is repeated above each doorway, entwined vines with delicate leaves, symbolizing fertility and abundance. As you observe Quintus's labors, a young apprentice comes over, carrying an assortment of tools slung across his shoulder. He eyes the ashes being unearthed with curiosity, but seems to know better than to interrupt the elderly man's work. Instead, he nods respectfully at Quintus before disappearing into the nearby crowd. Quintus takes notice of you standing there and looks up from his task, a hint of awareness in his gaze as if trying to remember how he arrived here, surrounded by strangers watching him dig out ashes on a drizzly afternoon like this one. You feel a flicker of empathy for him. It's not the most dignified thing to be doing at any time, especially when there are people around. With that thought in mind, Quintus goes back to his work, carefully gathering up the remains and placing them into an earthenware vessel adorned with small ceramic figurines. The glaze on these is starting to crack, a testament to countless years of exposure to heat, rain, and dust. Despite this, they still seem vibrant against the pale clay. You realize that Quintus has finished collecting the ashes when he leans back against his shovel, running a hand over his forehead in relief. He surveys the newly uncovered area with an air of accomplishment. It's not just the task completed, but also a small victory won over time and circumstance. You can almost hear him thinking to himself, "Ah, now I know where those last handfuls went." The sound carries on the wind as people nearby start making their way home for dinner, carrying wooden platters piled high with olives, bread, and fresh vegetables from today's market. Your stomach growls in response. It won't be long before you're hungry too. You glance over at Quintus once more. He looks up to meet your gaze now that his work is done. For a moment, the two of you lock eyes across the forum square as people begin passing by on their way home for dinner. The sense of stillness between them feels almost palpable, like time itself has slowed down in anticipation of what comes next. The warmth from nearby fires carries over to your skin now that Quintus is finished digging, and it brings a momentary respite from the chill that's starting to creep into the air as day gives way to twilight. The shadows on these stone walls seem longer than before, their edges more defined against the fading light of this autumn evening in Pompeii. As you continue watching the people around you begin heading home, you can't help but wonder what will happen next for Quintus and his ashes, whether they'll be taken to a family tomb or some private burial site. It's hard not to feel connected to him now that you've witnessed this intimate scene unfold on such a drizzly afternoon like today. Your focus drifts from the forum back down to your own feet, planted firmly in these wet cobblestones. The sensation of dampness has seeped into your boots, making every step slightly heavier than it was before. With each passing moment, you can feel yourself being pulled further away from Quintus and his ashes as people begin moving toward their evening routines. You take a deep breath to savor the cool air filling your lungs now that the market's bustle has started dissipating. Your footsteps seem quieter in this growing stillness, almost like an invisible thread is drawing you through the crowds, carrying you farther from Quintus and his unassuming task amidst the fading light of day. The scent of damp earth lingers on as darkness begins to fall over Pompeii, casting long shadows across its narrow streets. Night will soon be upon this city, bringing a different kind of rhythm, one where fires are lit. Dinner conversations flow late into the evening hours, and stories are shared round candlelight amidst the quiet sounds of household routines. But that's for later. Now you continue walking through Pompeii on your way to wherever it is you're headed. The shadows from nearby buildings stretch across cobblestones like black brushstrokes as night approaches, slowly darkening every surface, making each step feel heavier underfoot due to the dampness seeping into your boots. With that sense of growing darkness lingering around you, your thoughts eventually drift back to Quintus and his ashes. The memory lingers in the air long after he disappears from view, leaving behind a faint echo of what can only be described as a small act of kindness on this drizzly afternoon, when people gathered to watch him work amidst damp earth and fresh bread smells. As you disappear into the growing shadows, your feet seem to sink deeper into Pompeii's wet streets. The darkness that gathers is both calming and unsettling, like being enveloped in an unseen world where stories unfold without warning, their edges blurred by fading light and receding memories of everyday life in this ancient city. Time seems almost irrelevant as you walk further into the night. Your footsteps blend with those around you until they become indistinguishable from one another. The sounds carry on distant calls, laughter, the occasional clang of pots or clinking glasses from nearby households, yet each blends together into an endless hum that ebbs and flows like a river. You can feel yourself becoming part of this gentle flow as night deepens over Pompeii. Your pace slows to keep up with the growing stillness around you. It's almost soothing, carrying on like a lullaby amidst whispers from unseen listeners in every shadowed doorway. As you wander through the narrow streets, the air thickens with an almost palpable stillness. The sounds of the day, merchants hawking their wares, children playing in the alleys, have given way to a quiet that is both eerie and serene. You feel as though you're walking on tiptoes, not wanting to shatter this fragile calm. Every so often, a faint murmur carries through the air, like the distant hum of bees in summer. At first, it's hard to pinpoint where these whispers come from. They seem to emanate from every doorway, every alleyway, as if the very walls themselves are sharing secrets with one another. But as you continue on your way, you begin to realize that each whisper is distinct, like a snippet of conversation snatched from the wind. You hear the worried tone of a mother trying to soothe her fussy child, the hushed tones of lovers exchanging sweet nothings in some hidden courtyard, and even what sounds like a heated argument between two men in a nearby tavern. Each whispered phrase hangs suspended, like wisps of smoke carried on the breeze. The sky above is now a deep shade of indigo, with stars beginning to twinkle like diamonds scattered across the fabric of night. The moon, still low in the horizon, casts long shadows that stretch and twist through the streets, as if trying to reach out and snatch you into their grasp. Every so often, a stray beam of light from an open doorway or window catches your attention, illuminating fragments of ancient frescoes or tapestries hanging on walls. Your footsteps seem to echo off every stone facade, but somehow, like the whispers in the darkness, they're muffled, as if absorbed by some unseen force. The streets themselves appear empty, save for a few isolated figures: a priest making his way to the nearby temple of Isis, an elderly woman walking her sleeping cat on a leash, and a lone merchant carrying a bundle slung over one shoulder. As you walk further into the city's heart, the buildings seem to grow taller, their shadows deepening like dark pools. Your skin prickles with goosebumps as a faint tremor runs through your body, a warning sign that Vesuvius is stirring in its distant mountain lair. Or perhaps it's just another tremor in this ancient town's history of seismic shudders. The air remains heavy, almost viscous, and you feel the weight of centuries bearing down upon you. Every stone beneath your feet seems to whisper secrets, some of which might be true, others mere fictions spun by 1,000 generations. You begin to wonder if these whispered tales are echoes from Pompeii's past, or merely the product of an overactive imagination. Eventually, your wandering brings you to the outskirts of town, where the streets open up into a larger expanse, a place known as the Porta di Ercolano. Here you find yourself standing at the edge of the city, with Vesuvius looming in the distance like a sleeping giant. The mountain slopes are dark and featureless, save for an occasional spark or two where some late-night fire crackles to life. Your gaze drifts back into Pompeii itself, the sea of roofs stretching out before you, each one a mosaic of clay tiles glinting dully in the moonlight. In this moment, time seems to have come full circle, as if all that's happened over these past 24 hours is but a whispered rumor carried on the wind. A soft breeze stirs almost imperceptibly at first, and then picks up speed until it becomes a gentle caress against your skin. Your heart rate slows in sympathy with this growing stillness, allowing you to feel the very pulse of Pompeii's slumbering heartbeat. The heavy warmth of a midday sunbeam seeps through the narrow window above your head, casting dappled shadows on the wall opposite. The scent of fresh bread wafts from the bakery next door, mingling with the acrid tang of cooking oil and the sweet, slightly musky smell of the nearby forum's flower stalls. You are Poppaea, a slave in the household of Marcus Furius Crassipes, one of Pompeii's most prominent citizens. Your day begins like any other, waking to the sound of your mistress's maid, Aurelia, stirring outside your small room above the kitchen. The air is thick with the smell of last night's meal and this morning's cooking. As you rise from bed, a faint ache in your lower back reminds you that yesterday was particularly demanding. The laundry needed washing, the floors required mopping, and to top it off, Aurelia insisted on redecorating her own quarters while simultaneously helping with the household tasks. The weight of those duties settles heavy in your shoulders as you yawn. Downstairs, the kitchen is already bustling with activity. Your mistress's cook, old Lucius, expertly chops vegetables for today's soup while muttering to himself about the price of onions at market. You join him at the table, pouring yourself a cup of vinegar-based water from the jug that stands nearby, your own small concession to this morning's exertions. The taste is sour and refreshing, but it does little to ease the cramp in your right foot, which has been bothering you since yesterday afternoon when you were mopping the forum. You shift weight onto your other leg as Lucius hands you a steaming bowl of porridge made from emmer wheat, barely enough for a snack, let alone breakfast. Outside, the sounds of the city begin to stir. Vendors calling out their daily specials, children's laughter carrying on the breeze, and the creaking of wooden stalls being set up in preparation for another day. You glance at the small clock Lucius installed last year. It shows 6:40 a.m., just a few hours before the morning market is due to open. Your mistress's voice carries from her quarters above the atrium, reminding you that today's schedule includes attending the forum's daily gathering of merchants and traders. You've been tasked with fetching fresh flowers for Orlia while keeping an eye on Marcus Furius Crassipes as he conducts his business dealings, always a delicate balancing act. The memory of your mistress's words lingers in the air, leaving you to ponder how best to navigate today's obligations without drawing too much attention. Your stomach growls in anticipation of lunchtime, usually served around noon, and the chance to sit with Lucius for a few moments respite from your duties. For now, though, duty calls. You take up your basket and set off towards the forum, weaving through the growing crowds as they make their way toward the morning market. The scent of fresh bread wafts stronger here, enticing passers-by into nearby shops while tempting you to linger outside with its warm, inviting aroma. Your footsteps carry you past vendors touting their wares, a few potted herbs, an assortment of locally made cheeses, and even some imported olives, all at prices that make your eyes water. You give the vendors a nod as they haggle over small change with the other customers, feeling grateful for Lucius's steady wages. Eventually, you reach Aurelia's flower stall near the forum entrance, where she greets you with a knowing smile and a request to fetch some choice roses from her storage room, the red ones, she emphasizes. You take your time navigating through the narrow aisles between the other vendors' stalls, noticing how each of them is busy arranging their wares in anticipation of today's business. The air thickens as you near Aurelia's storage room. A sweet mixture of flowers and damp earth envelops you like a shroud heavy with moisture. You open the door to find shelves stacked haphazardly with bunches of fresh herbs, rosemary here, thyme there, each one tied together with a length of twine. You take your time selecting the finest roses from their respective boxes and carefully place them into Aurelia's basket for you to carry back. The gentle weight of those flowers in your hand reminds you that even amidst all these competing demands on your attention, some things remain constant, like Lucius's good cooking or the vendor's persistent haggling. Back at the forum entrance, Marcus Furius Crassipes greets his clients and associates with a mixture of warmth and authority. You watch as he effortlessly navigates negotiations over land prices, olive oil contracts, and local taxes, always keeping an eye on what needs attention from you while ensuring no details slip through his fingers. Your thoughts wander to the prospect of lunch, Lucius's famous bean soup or perhaps some of last night's leftover meat. As your stomach growls in anticipation, you feel a tap on your shoulder. Turning around, you're met with Orlia's expectant smile and an air of excitement. Today is shaping up to be another day like the ones before it. Time for us to get back, she says, her voice barely above a whisper as if sharing some great secret among friends. We can't let our master down. Her eyes flicker towards Marcus Furius Crassipes, now absorbed in his discussions with several prominent citizens of Pompeii. A subtle nod from Aurelia reminds you that discretion is key when dealing with her mistress's household. Together, you both weave through the crowd, pausing occasionally to exchange nods or brief pleasantries with other townspeople. A merchant here, an acquaintance there, each one blending into the fabric of this ever-unfolding city. Every step carries you closer to the main forum square, where Marcus Furius Crassipes awaits your attention. And yet, for now at least, it's just another day like any other in Pompeii. As I walk through the narrow streets of Pompeii, the sounds of merchants hawking their wares and the clanging of pots from the nearby kitchen fill my ears. The air is thick with the smells of fresh bread, roasting meats, and the faint tang of sea salt carried on the breeze from the Bay of Naples. I weave through the crowds, my eyes scanning for any sign of Marcus Furius Crassipes or his entourage. I've been tasked with delivering a message to him about an upcoming shipment of goods, but so far no one seems to know where he is at this hour. Perhaps he's enjoying some leisure time in his gardens. Or maybe he's attending to business elsewhere in the city. As I turn down a side alleyway, a hand clamps onto my shoulder, spinning me around. It's Aurelia, our household's resident gossip and scullery maid. Her eyes are wide with excitement as she tugs on her apron strings. Poppaea sent for you, she whispers urgently. She needs your attention straight away. My heart skips a beat at the mention of my mistress's name. I quickly nod to Aurelia, allowing her to lead me back through the winding streets towards our villa. We walk in silence, but I can sense the weight of unspoken gossip and intrigue emanating from my guide. As we approach the villa, I notice an unusual cluster of people gathered outside Poppaea's chambers, a small retinue of guardsmen stationed by her door, their usual stern expressions softened into something almost like anticipation. I feel a shiver run down my spine as Aurelia gestures for me to follow her inside. The air within the villa is heavy with incense and spices, and I catch the faint scent of rose petals carried on Poppaea's perfume. Upon entering the reception room, I'm immediately struck by the tranquil atmosphere. Soft music drifts from a nearby lyre player as Poppaea herself sits poised in her favorite pose, reclining on a velvet couch with a delicate hand resting against an ornate marble headrest. Her eyes lock onto mine, and for a moment we simply regard each other without speaking. Then she beckons me closer with a slender finger, the diamond-encrusted ring glinting like ice in the morning light. "Tell me," she says, her voice husky as ever, "I've had word that you were seen talking to one of Marcus's men earlier today." My thoughts flash back to my encounters on the Forum Square. I'd been chatting with him about nothing more significant than his upcoming wine shipment. Still, Poppaea's expression is guarded enough for me not to take any chances. "Ah," I say carefully, merely discussing trade matters and arranging a meeting between you both. Poppaea leans forward slightly, her voice taking on an air of playfulness. "Oh, I see. And what do you think of Marcus these days? Has he still got that spark in his eye?" For some reason, this question feels loaded with hidden meaning. I hesitate for a heartbeat before launching into an innocent-sounding reply. "Oh, yes. He's as charming and courteous as ever, always ready to charm the ladies at court." Poppaea raises one eyebrow, but seems unconvinced by my bland recitation of Marcus's supposed virtues. Instead of pushing further, she leans back against her couch once more, releasing a sigh that sends shivers down my spine. I fear I may be overthinking this, she says softly to herself, as if only half convinced even now. But one can never be too cautious when it comes to the favor or disfavor of those in power. The air thickens around me like a miasma, and for an instant, our conversation hangs suspended between words unspoken and unsaid. Before I know what's happening, Poppaea rises from her couch with fluid ease. The change is sudden enough that it sends my own balance teetering, as if the world itself has shifted beneath me like sand in a stormy tide. Her fingers brush against mine, sending an electric tingle through our contact points. Come, she says with a smile bright and brittle as her very beauty. I need you to perform some favors for me today. My heart thuds like the beat of drums as I trail behind Poppaea into her chambers, unsure what exactly lies ahead, but certain it can't be anything less than extraordinary in these last hours before Pompeii's fateful eruption. In those hazy light-filled rooms with their mosaics and gleaming marble surfaces, we are about to embark on a dance so intricate that only the most subtle threads of fate will guide us through its treacherous turns. The scent of fresh bread wafts through the air, carrying with it the promise of a morning meal. You find yourself standing outside the entrance to Watchtower Alpha 5, its stone walls bearing the weight of centuries. The sun casts long shadows across the ground, illuminating the rough-hewn stones and casting dappled light on your feet. You can feel the cool breeze rustling through the olive trees that surround the tower, their leaves whispering softly against each other in a soothing melody. As you breathe in deeply, you notice the tang of salt carried on the wind from the nearby sea, mingling with the scent of bread to create an intoxicating aroma. Lucius, the soldier on watchtower duty, emerges from his quarters, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He's been stationed here for several rotations now and has grown accustomed to the rhythm of life in this small outpost. As he stretches his arms overhead, you notice the worn leather straps that bind his sword at his side. With a quiet grunt, Lucius begins his morning routine, checking the tower's defenses, reviewing the previous day's logs, and making any necessary adjustments to the watch schedule. His eyes scan the horizon, taking in the rolling hills and distant volcanic peaks before focusing on the immediate surroundings, the olive groves, the nearby vineyards, and the bustling streets of Pompeii below. As he moves about, you notice the soft creaking of leather boots against stone flags, a gentle accompaniment to Lucius's movements. His footsteps echo through the stillness of early morning, announcing his presence to any potential observers in the surrounding countryside. The air is heavy with anticipation, or perhaps it's just your own drowsiness. Lucius pauses at the parapet, surveying the landscape as he takes a slow drag on his pipe. He exhales slowly, watching the wisps of smoke dissipate into the morning light. His gaze drifts to the nearby vineyards, where workers are beginning their day's labor amidst rows of neatly trimmed vines. He seems lost in thought for a moment, perhaps recalling previous encounters with locals or pondering some internal question that has been nagging at him. The silence is only broken by the occasional chirp of birds and the distant rumble of hammer blows echoing from the city below, masons working on new projects or repairs to existing structures. Time passes slowly as you stand there, sharing Lucius's momentary reverie. Your gaze drifts toward the sea, where a faint mist clings to the horizon like an ethereal veil. The breeze carries a hint of moisture on its breath, foreshadowing another day in this balmy climate. Lucius breaks his silence with a quiet sigh and turns back to his duties, descending into the tower's lower levels for a routine inspection of their supplies and equipment. His footsteps grow fainter as he disappears from view, leaving you alone at the parapet. The stillness envelops you once more, an unsettling calm that seems almost palpable in its intensity. As if sensing your presence, the wind stirs again, carrying with it a faint whisper of distant rumblings deep within Mount Vesuvius itself. As you stand there, a chill runs down your spine as the faint whisper of rumblings grows louder in your mind's ear. You strain to listen, trying to discern what lies beyond the veil of stillness that surrounds you. The wind carries more than just sound. It whispers secrets, tantalizing hints at unknown truths. Your imagination, fueled by exhaustion and the eerie atmosphere, begins to weave a tapestry of possibilities. To your left, the dark silhouette of Mount Vesuvius looms large against the starry sky, its slopes shrouded in an impenetrable veil of shadows. The volcano's presence is both majestic and foreboding, casting a long shadow that seems to stretch out before you like an omen. Your thoughts drift back to the countless warnings from the augurs, the soothsayers who interpret omens for the Roman Empire. They've spoken in hushed tones of impending doom, warning of earthquakes and fire that would consume everything beneath its wrath. The stillness is oppressive now, weighing upon your shoulders like a physical force. Every fiber of your being seems attuned to the sudden silence, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop, or rather, the earthquake to strike. Your heart beats in time with the distant rumblings, an unsettling harmony that underscores the precarious balance between calm and chaos. Your gaze drifts away from Mount Vesuvius's dark shape, scanning the surrounding landscape for any sign of life beyond your own. The villas below are shrouded in darkness, their windows like empty eyes staring back at you with a hint of menace. Smoke curls lazily into the night air from some of them, perhaps fires burning low to ward off the chill, but there's no sound of laughter or conversation, only an oppressive silence that seems almost palpable. A faint rustling comes from your right, where the slope of the hill drops away beneath you. You turn, hand instinctively going to the hilt of your gladius, as a figure emerges from the darkness. It's one of the sentries from Watchtower Alpha 4. His eyes are wide with fear, and he approaches you quickly. "What is it?" you ask, trying not to startle him further. He hesitates before speaking in a low voice. "Sir, I saw something down below. A light flickering on one of the villas. It looked like someone had lit a torch, but I couldn't see anyone moving around." You exchange a skeptical glance with your companion at the parapet, a fellow soldier who's been watching alongside you for what feels like an eternity. He raises an eyebrow, his expression questioning whether this could be more than just a prank or some sort of warning signal from one household to another. As you ponder the sentry's words, the distant rumblings grow louder once more, now unmistakably the sound of earth shifting deep within the volcano's core. An earthquake is building in power, an inevitable force that will bring destruction upon this city when it finally breaks free. What lies hidden beneath your feet? As Try's words faded away, the rumblings beneath their feet grew louder still, a low-pitched drumbeat that seemed to reverberate through every cell in his body. The air was electric with tension, heavy with an almost palpable anticipation of disaster. Tries stood rigid at attention, his eyes fixed on some point beyond the horizon as he spoke words that seemed to be torn from his very soul. The soldier standing watch beside him shifted uncomfortably beneath the weight of Try's gaze. Tries, he ventured softly, trying to break the spell that had fallen over them both, but his friend did not respond. His eyes remained fixed on some distant point, lost in thought as the earthquake built to a crescendo. The sound grew louder still, rocks crashing against each other deep within the volcano's belly, an unending cacophony of shattering stone and screams that seemed almost human. Beneath their feet, the earth trembled with growing violence, its quakes becoming more frequent and intense by the minute. Try's eyes snapped back into focus as he turned to his friend with a look of grim urgency on his face. "It's going," he whispered hoarsely, his words barely audible over the din that had become almost deafening in intensity. The soldier nodded mutely, his own eyes scanning the dark shape looming before them, Mount Vesuvius itself. As they watched, a massive cloud billowed forth from the mountain's flanks, its leading edge aflame with fire and smoke that seemed to writhe like living things as it clawed at the night air. The ground beneath their feet shook with increasing violence now, a series of jolting tremors that threatened to throw them both off balance. "Get back," Tries shouted above the rising din, grabbing his friend's arm in a grip that was almost desperate. "It won't hold, we have to get clear." The soldier stumbled after him as they reeled backward through the chaotic streets of Pompeii, dodging terrified civilians who fled screaming from the path of destruction, now bearing down upon them with unstoppable fury. Lamps and torches flared wildly in windows above, casting a mad dance of shadows across buildings that seemed to totter on their foundations beneath the pounding earthquake. Roofs began to collapse, crumbling under pressure, as stone blocks snapped free like playing cards tossed aside by some giant hand. A massive tile shattered loose from the roof overhead, crashing down mere feet away with a sound that was both deafening and eerily precise in its calculation of destruction. "We can't outrun it," Tries yelled above the rising roar, but his friend didn't need convincing. They fled on, desperately seeking refuge from an enemy who had no intention of sparing them. In their wake, panic reigned supreme as Pompeii's people stampeded blindly through streets already awash with debris. Hysteria gripped every face, even those driven by the instinct to flee for their lives now screaming in terror as they clung together like fragile ships at anchor, helpless against a tempest that threatened to consume them all. Tries and his friend stumbled on, their own path marked only by the faint scent of ash carried ahead like an omen. In darkness, it seemed impossible to discern what lay before or behind, but in one thing they could be certain: destruction was coming for Pompeii now with a speed that would leave no time for prayer. A section of road gave way beneath their feet as they stumbled on, collapsing into the abyss below like an abandoned bridge. The ground shook, then trembled again and once more still, its quakes growing weaker by degrees, but only slowly losing force in this struggle to bring them down at last. As one final convulsion racked the earth beneath their feet, Try's grip on his friend's arm faltered for an instant, a mere moment lost as both men stumbled forward with legs that seemed suddenly weak. In that same instant, something gave. A chasm yawned open in the road ahead of them, its edge crumbling away like clay under pressure to expose depths far beneath their feet. With screams echoing wild and free through night-shrouded streets now torn apart by chaos, both men plunged forward, lost into darkness, as the earth itself seemed to rip apart with an earthquake that shook Pompeii down to its very foundations. It was then that everything went black for Tries, a silence so profound it almost deafened him in its wake. All thought of his friend vanished as he tumbled through void after void, each new space somehow more terrifying than the last, until finally his fall came to an end with sudden impact on stone-hard earth below. Gasping for breath, still shaken from their mad ride into disaster's maw, Tries pushed himself up onto hands and knees in darkness that seemed absolute. The world had been torn apart beneath him. He knew this much, if nothing else. But there was something more. The warmth of the stone floor seeps into your feet as you stand still for a moment, taking in the familiar scent of baking bread wafting from the nearby ovens. You've heard the bakery owners, Marcus and his wife Orlia, talking about experimenting with new recipes using volcanic ash to add a unique flavor to their products. As you make your way through the narrow streets, the aroma of freshly baked goods grows stronger, enticing passers-by to stop by for a sample. The sound of hammers ringing out from nearby workshops provides a steady background hum, punctuated occasionally by the clanging of pots and pans being hung up to dry in the sun. You notice that some stalls have already begun selling perfume made with ingredients like lavender, rose petals, and myrrh, but not just any ordinary perfumes. These are special blends created using volcanic ash from Mount Vesuvius itself, said to have therapeutic properties when applied topically or used in aromatherapy rituals. People claim it helps alleviate headaches, calms the mind, and even reduces inflammation. Curiosity gets the better of you as you approach one such stall run by a young vendor named Gaius. He's enthusiastically explaining the benefits of his concoctions to an elderly woman who looks skeptical but intrigued nonetheless. The sunlight casts shadows on the nearby buildings, creating an illusion that the volcanic ash being sold has been imbued with magical properties, or perhaps it's just your imagination playing tricks. Gaius notices you listening in and offers a friendly nod before launching into his sales pitch once more. You see, this special blend contains carefully selected essences of myrrh, frankincense, and the finest quality volcanic ash from Mount Vesuvius. It not only clears the mind, but also helps to soothe skin irritations caused by long hours working outdoors. The elderly woman asks a few pointed questions before placing an order for a small vial of perfume. Gaius expertly wraps her purchase in a piece of linen, carefully securing it with twine as you observe him work. You're about to continue on your way when the vendor mentions that his mother was one of several women employed by the local apothecary to distill and mix various potions using natural ingredients, an essential service for those struggling with illness or injury. People often visit these workshops seeking remedies for their ailments, from skin conditions to internal complaints. As you ponder this information, your gaze wanders across the nearby streets. Women carrying baskets on their heads hurry by, exchanging quiet conversations about the latest gossip in local politics, while simultaneously balancing loads of fresh produce, bread loaves, or woven goods. Men in tunics stride purposefully toward their workshops, eager to tackle whatever projects await them. Some glance at the sky with a hint of concern. Gaius notices your interest in his work and begins explaining how he learned about perfumery from watching his mother create medicinal remedies for her clients. She taught me that even when you're working with materials as coarse-grained as volcanic ash, it's essential to balance their properties carefully so they become a harmonious blend of scents rather than overpowering the senses. A gust of wind carries the scent of baking bread toward you once more. You catch sight of Aurelia from the bakery peeking out between the slats of her oven door. She gives you a warm smile, beckoning you to come by for a taste test. The sounds around you gradually grow softer as people begin preparing for dinner. The clanging of pots and pans subsides. Vendors start packing up their wares. You're enveloped in an air thick with anticipation. Everyone's expecting the annual harvest festival later that night, where they'll celebrate the bounty of the season with music, food, games, and performances. As you continue strolling through Pompeii, taking it all in, your attention is drawn to a nearby vendor selling intricate mosaics created from local tiles. These colorful works showcase scenes depicting mythological figures or everyday life. They're both beautiful and thought-provoking, inviting the viewer into their world for a brief moment. Gaius notices you admiring his work and mentions that his own sister, Aurelia, no relation to your friend, has recently joined one of the local artisan guilds as an apprentice mosaicist. He shares some stories about her progress. She's been working tirelessly to perfect this style inspired by ancient Greek art. People say it holds a special kind of energy when crafted using natural materials. Your thoughts drift back to Gaius and his vendor stall as you remember he mentioned creating perfumes with volcanic ash, an unusual practice that seems both innovative and intriguing. You recall walking past his stand earlier in the day while browsing through various stalls selling local products. Eventually, it's time for a rest, perhaps not just from exploring, but also the mental stimulation of trying to make sense of everything you've seen so far. As you begin looking around for an ideal spot to sit and observe people passing by, your gaze lands on Marcus from the bakery sitting at his own corner table in the nearby courtyard. Marcus is engaged in a hushed conversation with another patron. They seem to be discussing some issue related to local trade agreements or perhaps something more personal. It's difficult to make out what exactly they're talking about without intruding, but you notice how peaceful this atmosphere seems. People come and go as needed, sharing stories over their meals while the warm sun casts an inviting glow across everything. Marcus catches your eye and raises his head for a brief moment before returning to his conversation. You take that opportunity to quietly slip into one of the nearby empty chairs, not too close to Marcus, but still within earshot in case you need to respond or contribute something thoughtfully to their discussion. As you settle into the empty chair, trying not to draw attention to yourself, Marcus and his companion seem oblivious to your new presence. They're too engrossed in their conversation, sipping wine from clay cups as they speak. The air is thick with the scent of olives and fresh bread wafting from a nearby food stall. And then I told him, take a handful of that ash, mix it with some olive oil, and apply it to your skin before bed. He laughed at me, said it would only make his skin itch, Marcus says, chuckling as he takes another sip from his cup. His companion, an older man with a wispy beard and kind eyes, nods thoughtfully. I've tried it myself, the bearded man continues. It does seem to have some effect on the rash that afflicts me. Perhaps there's something in the ash. Zah, but what do I know? A simple apothecary such as myself can't hope to understand the secrets of nature. Marcus leans forward, his eyes sparkling with curiosity. I've been meaning to speak with our chief perfumer about this phenomenon. Have you spoken with him at all? The bearded man shakes his head. Not yet, but I've heard rumors he's experimenting with infusing ash into scents for the nobles of Rome. Marcus leans back in his chair, stroking his chin thoughtfully. You take the opportunity to observe them more closely, intrigued by their conversation. The perfumer, a figure you'd only caught glimpses of during your wanderings through Pompeii's streets, seems almost ordinary among the wealthy elite. A small breeze stirs nearby, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke and ash. It's a subtle reminder that not all is as tranquil in this bustling city as Marcus and his companions seem to believe. You recall rumors about increased volcanic activity in recent months, tremors felt by many residents during their daily routines, distant rumblings in the night. Your gaze drifts back to Marcus and his friend, now lost in discussion of various ingredients used in perfumery. The sounds around you blend together. Merchants calling out prices for fresh produce, children playing near a nearby fountain, the murmur of haggling customers at the food stalls. Time seems to stretch as you sit there, trying not to be too conspicuous while still eavesdropping on their conversation. Your presence becomes almost an afterthought in this atmosphere filled with sights and sounds that might otherwise capture your attention. You continue listening as Marcus's companion mentions something about a unique ash-infused fragrance for the upcoming festival of Bacchus, one said to have the power not only to attract favorable attention from patrons, but also grant protection against any potential calamities. A sudden, almost imperceptible shift in his tone catches your ear. Some folks say it might just ward off the worst that's been threatening us these past few months. Marcus leans forward again, a look of interest on his face. In Vogues, who are folks saying this? The bearded man glances around the area cautiously before lowering his voice further still. The scent of baking bread wafts through the air, mingling with the faint tang of olive oil and the sweet hint of fresh herbs from the nearby market stalls. In Vogues, who are folks saying this? The bearded man glances around the area cautiously before lowering his voice further still. He leans in closer to his companion, a young priest named Marcus, who nods sympathetically as he continues his conversation with a group of merchants. Their discussion revolves around the latest rumors and warnings from the authorities about potential unrest in the city. The bearded man's name is Gaius, and he owns one of the many small businesses that dot the streets of Pompeii. His concern is palpable, not just for his own livelihood, but also for the well-being of his family. The sound of hammers ringing against metal echoes from a nearby workshop as workers labor over their daily tasks. The rhythmic beat provides a steady background hum to Gaius and Marcus's conversation, which grows more animated by the minute. Passers-by occasionally pause to listen in on snippets of the discussion, but no one seems overly interested. After all, it is just another day in Pompeii. As they speak, the sun begins its slow descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets. The air starts to cool slightly, and Gaius can feel a gentle breeze rustling his cloak as he gestures emphatically with one hand, while holding onto his basket of fresh produce with the other. His wife, Aurelia, had reminded him earlier that day not to forget their regular order from the local baker, an arrangement they've had for years now. Marcus listens intently, occasionally interjecting a question or making note on a worn parchment tucked away in his scribal satchel. As he records these details, Gaius glances around the gathering crowd with growing unease. Rumors of unrest are one thing, but it is the way people speak that worries him. Hushed tones and furtive glances say more than words ever could. The weight of his basket grows heavier in his hand as he shifts his stance to better observe Marcus's scribbling. The young priest writes with a practiced ease, leaving behind neat rows of cursive script on the parchment surface. Gaius can't help but wonder what specific information is being recorded, perhaps something that could be used to calm the city's nerves or maybe even stir up more tension. The scent of baking bread grows stronger now, carrying with it hints of fresh yeast and an enticing aroma that has his stomach growling in anticipation. Aurelia will have a warm loaf waiting for him when he returns home later tonight. She always knows just how to turn the ordinary into something special. Marcus finishes writing and looks up at Gaius with a serious expression. Gaius, I think it's time we spoke more openly about this matter. We've been told by our superiors that there may be some trouble brewing in nearby towns. Possibly even here. His voice trails off as he glances around the gathering crowd once more. As they continue to speak, Gaius becomes increasingly distracted by the commotion surrounding a local merchant who's arguing with one of his customers. The dispute revolves around an inflated price for a shipment of olive oil. Not that any of this is unusual in Pompeii. Haggling over prices and goods is an integral part of daily life here. The sound of raised voices carries on the breeze, mingling with the hammering from nearby workstations to create a cacophony of sounds that are both familiar and disquieting. Gaius watches as the situation escalates until eventually, one party storms off in anger while another slinks away looking chastened. Not exactly an unfamiliar outcome. Marcus's voice brings him back into focus. Gaius, I think we should. He trails off, glancing around to ensure they are still alone. Their discussion is hushed and urgent now, their words weaving a web of tension that hangs precariously in the air like the scent of fresh bread wafting from the nearby baker's oven. The darkness beyond the street lamps starts to creep across the cobblestones, as evening wears on each shadow deepening into an ever-growing sense of unease. It is times like these when Gaius feels a nagging suspicion that perhaps this life, this city, and its constant worries are more than just his imagination's worst fears. As they continue their hushed conversation, Gaius can't help but think about the weight he carries, not just the physical load of his daily responsibilities, but also the burden of keeping his family safe in a world that seems increasingly treacherous. Gaius's thoughts were interrupted by his brother Marcus's gentle tug on his arm. He looked down to see a mixture of concern and curiosity etched on Marcus's face. "Brother, I've been thinking," Marcus said softly, "what if it's not just a coincidence? What if the earthquakes we're feeling are more than just random tremors?" Gaius raised an eyebrow, intrigued by his brother's line of inquiry. They had indeed experienced several small quakes in recent days, but no one seemed too concerned about them. "What do you mean?" Gaius asked, his tone laced with skepticism. "Well," Marcus began, "have you noticed how the earthquakes seem to coincide with the other strange occurrences?" Gaius hesitated for a moment before responding. The past few weeks had been filled with rumors of unexplained noises and lights in the nearby woods, which some claimed were signs from the gods. While Gaius didn't put much stock in such superstitions, he couldn't deny that something felt off. I see what you're getting at, Gaius said slowly, but surely these are just unrelated events. Marcus shook his head. I'm not so sure, brother. I think there's more to it than we can understand. Gaius sighed inwardly, feeling the weight of Marcus's concerns bearing down on him once again. He didn't want to alarm their family or cause unnecessary panic. I'll speak with Father, Gaius said reassuringly, but for now let's keep this between us. We don't know what we're dealing with here. Marcus nodded understandingly, but his eyes betrayed a hint of unease. As they continued walking through the deserted streets, Gaius couldn't help but feel that he was shouldering not just one burden, keeping their family safe in an increasingly treacherous world, but also carrying the weight of his brother's fears. Their conversation had barely begun when they were interrupted by a group of townspeople gathered near the forum. They huddled together, whispering among themselves and casting nervous glances around the square. Gaius recognized several of them as respected members of their community. Old Lucretia, known for her insight into the workings of the gods, young Lucius, who had spent years studying the movements of the stars, and Aurelia's father, a skilled builder with unparalleled knowledge of the earth. What's going on? Gaius asked an elderly man standing nearby. What's caused this commotion? The old man looked up at him with worry etched on his face. It seems we've had another earthquake, he said quietly. This one was closer to town and there are reports of tremors in the mountains. Gaius exchanged a glance with Marcus. The tension between them seemed palpable as they absorbed this new information. We should get home, Gaius suggested gently, already turning towards their family's villa. Marcus nodded silently, his eyes scanning the gathering crowd for any signs of panic or chaos. As they walked through the increasingly deserted streets, Gaius couldn't shake off the feeling that time was running out. Their town had always been prone to earthquakes and volcanic activity, but something about these recent events felt different, like a subtle shift in the balance of power between the earth and its inhabitants. Back at their villa, the atmosphere was tense as they shared what little information they knew with their family. Gaius's mother paced back and forth across the courtyard, her hands clasped together as if trying to ward off impending doom. His father listened attentively, his expression a mixture of concern and understanding. We'll get through this, he said finally, placing a reassuring hand on Gaius's shoulder. We've faced earthquakes before, we can face them again. Gaius nodded in agreement, but couldn't help feeling that their world was teetering on the edge, one misstep away from catastrophe. As night began to fall over Pompeii, casting long shadows across the rooftops and winding streets, Gaius couldn't shake off the sense of foreboding settling over him. It seemed that no matter how hard he tried to suppress his fears for the sake of social order, they continued to linger, a constant reminder of the uncertainty that lay just beneath their tranquil surface. He glanced around at the faces of those dear to him, Marcus's worried expression, his mother's anxious fidgeting, and his father's determined resolve. And in this quiet moment before sleep claimed them all, Gaius knew that he would do everything in his power to protect the ones he loved, no matter what dangers lay ahead. With a weary sigh, Gaius turned towards their family's bedrooms, hoping for some respite from the weight of responsibility bearing down on him. Little did he know that this night would be one of only brief rest before the eruption shook their lives forever. The scent of worn leather and old parchment wafts through the air as you settle into your chair beside Marcus Furius's desk. The soft creaking of the wooden slats beneath you, a gentle accompaniment to the quiet evening. Marcus, an esteemed senator in his mid-50s with a wispy beard and spectacles perched on the end of his nose, looks up from the document he's studying. His eyes, red-rimmed from hours spent poring over scrolls and parchment, squint behind the lenses as he nods to you in greeting. The evening sun casts long shadows across the room, illuminating dust motes dancing in the faint breeze that stirs the air. The fire crackling on the hearth has died down to embers, casting a warm glow over the space but not enough heat to dispel the slight chill of the late afternoon. As you take your seat, Marcus gestures for his servant, Lucius, to pour wine into 2 clay cups. You watch as he carefully measures out the liquid from the small amphora on the sideboard, before decanting it with a gentle clink against the ceramic rim. The wine has been cooling in the shadowed area of the room since morning, its clear glass bottle reflecting dappled light that seems to dance across the surface. As you inhale the bouquet released by Lucius's pouring, your nostrils flare slightly at the familiar aroma, a mixture of grape and earthy undertones. Marcus sets his quill aside and leans forward on his elbows, a hint of weariness in his posture but still an air of command about him. "Ah, I trust you slept well last night. The unsettled weather has been keeping me from rest." His brow creases slightly as he adds, almost wistfully, "It's been 3 days now since the tremors began, so slight at first we hardly noticed them, but increasing in frequency and severity with each passing day." His eyes cloud over for a moment before refocusing on you. The silence that follows stretches out, punctuated only by the occasional crack of the wooden beams overhead. You sense an undercurrent to his words, something not quite stated. Perhaps it's the lingering unease after those days of earthquakes and rumors about Vesuvius stirring once more. Lucius stands quietly at attention beside you, his eyes fixed on some point outside as he waits for further instruction. His hands rest lightly on the silver handle of a nearby wine jug, ready to serve whenever needed. Marcus pushes back in his chair, steepling his fingers together before leaning forward again. "Tell me, have you heard any talk among the merchants and traders about their trade routes? The usual flow of goods from Rome seems altered this week." You note how carefully he avoids mentioning specifics, earthquakes, tremors, or the rumors spreading through Pompeii like wildfire, choosing instead to focus on mundane concerns. As a senator's concern for commerce is intertwined with his role in governance, it makes sense that he'd want to gauge the impact of these events on trade. The room grows quiet once more as Lucius pours wine into your cup, this time using the silver lip to break the surface tension, creating an almost imperceptible splash. You can feel the fine tremble beneath the handle in his hand. Marcus takes a sip from his own cup before setting it down carefully on the edge of the desk. "I'm concerned about the state of our storehouses, not just for food and wine, but also grains. The drought last summer weakened many crops already. It's possible, though I hope not, that we face a harvest failure this year." As you hold your cup between both hands to warm it through, a faint memory stirs within you. The dusty rows of storage rooms beneath Pompeii's Forum, lined with wooden beams and clay tiles bearing the weight of countless barrels. The smell of old wood and damp earth rises from that recollection. Your thoughts drift away as Lucius takes his leave, quietly withdrawing to attend to other tasks elsewhere in the house. Marcus leans back once more into his chair, cradling his cup between both hands now. Time seems suspended for a moment until you feel it, your own weight shifting on the wooden seat of the chair, settling deeper into its curve as you relax. Marcus takes another sip from his cup before setting it down beside him. "There's something I must discuss with my colleagues tomorrow," he says slowly, choosing his words carefully. The room has grown quiet once more, but this time there's an underlying sense that decisions are being weighed and measured in the shadows. 3 days later, the senator sat in his chambers, surrounded by the familiar trappings of power and influence. The same cup from which he'd sipped wine 3 nights prior still rested beside him on a small side table. His eyes wandered to it now as if searching for some hidden clue or message that only he could decipher. Tomorrow would bring the council meeting, where he was expected to reveal more about his concerns regarding the recent earthquakes and tremors affecting the region. The senator's advisors had urged caution, suggesting that speaking out might spark panic among the citizens of Pompeii. But he knew better. Experience had taught him that whispers in the dark were often louder than words spoken aloud. The door creaked open as one of his attendants entered with a discreet knock. "Your Excellency," the man's tone was deferential, but there was an underlying tension to it, a shared understanding between them that they both walked on thin ice. "Ah, yes," the senator replied, gesturing toward a vacant chair opposite him. "Please bring in Senator Lucius." The attendant nodded and slipped back out into the corridor, leaving the room with a faint scent of wax polish lingering behind. Lucius was one of his closest allies on the council, someone who shared his concerns about the increasingly erratic seismic activity plaguing their city. The senator had requested his presence for what he dubbed an emergency consultation. Lucius's appearance in these chambers would be seen as an endorsement, a nod from his colleague that this meeting carried weight. The door swung open once more, and Senator Lucius walked in with the air of someone expecting to discuss serious matters. His eyes swept across the room before coming to rest on the senator himself. For a fleeting moment, they exchanged a glance, one of mutual understanding and shared unease. "Good day, Lucius," the senator said as his colleague took a seat opposite him. "Thank you for arriving promptly." Lucius nodded curtly in response, his eyes never leaving those of his host. "Of course, Your Excellency." The formality hung between them like an unspoken challenge, one that neither dared to voice. So the senator began slowly, leaning back into his chair as if preparing himself for a long conversation. "I think it's time we spoke plainly about what has been weighing on my mind these past few days. Lucius, you're aware of my concerns regarding the recent earthquakes and tremors." Lucius nodded once more, his expression unreadable, but not entirely so. There was something almost like a flicker in those dark eyes that suggested he too had private fears. "I've spoken with some of our engineers," the senator continued. "They report increased seismic activity around Vesuvius. The likelihood of another eruption is growing by the day." Lucius shifted slightly, his hands clasped together as if steeled for an impending storm. Yes, I'm aware of their findings. It's no secret among us that we're facing a potentially catastrophic situation. But what isn't being discussed, the senator cut in, his voice rising to interrupt Lucius, is our readiness. Nor rather's lack thereof. We have emergency protocols and evacuation procedures laid out on paper, but are they truly prepared for such an event? Lucius's gaze narrowed ever so slightly as if searching for a hidden motive behind these words, or perhaps testing the waters to gauge his colleague's true stance. We can't let fear dictate our actions, Lucius countered, or we risk chaos and panic in the streets. The people of Pompeii won't know what hit them. The senator leaned forward once more, placing both hands flat on the armrests as if drawing himself into this conversation. Precisely my point, Lucius. We're caught between a rock and hard place, or rather Vesuvius and our collective guilt over being inadequately prepared for its wrath. We must weigh what's at stake, public safety versus public perception. Their words hung in the air like ash on the wind, unspoken fears and unresolved decisions lingering behind them, as if waiting to break free into a maelstrom of uncertainty. Outside these chambers, Pompeii slumbered, unaware that beneath its streets, ancient powers stirred. The warmth of a dying fire seeps into your skin as you settle back onto the pallet, its worn wooden slats creaking softly beneath you. The flickering flames dance across the stone floor, casting shadows on the walls as the night wears on. Outside these chambers, Pompeii slumbered, unaware that beneath its streets, ancient powers stirred. In this quiet hour before dawn, the city's sounds are muted. No merchants hawking their wares, no children playing in the narrow alleys. Just an occasional dog barking far off or a cat prowling through the darkness. The air is heavy with the scent of wood smoke and cooking oil from last night's meals. You feel the weight of your own exhaustion as you let out a gentle sigh, releasing the tension from your shoulders. It's been a long day, one that started before dawn when the sun was still hiding behind the hills. You rose early to help with the household chores, fetching water from the public fountain, feeding the chickens in the courtyard, and sweeping the floors. The fire crackles softly as you pick up a small basket of last night's leftovers, scraps of bread, some cheese, and what looks like a piece of boiled meat. It's not much to eat for breakfast, but it'll do until you can get out into the city proper. You sniff at the food, wrinkling your nose slightly. It's been left out too long and has developed that familiar stale taste. Your stomach growls softly in protest as you settle back onto the pallet, trying to decide what to eat first. Your companion, a small dog with matted fur and a wagging tail, snuffles around your feet, hoping for scraps of its own. You scratch behind her ears, feeling the gentle rise and fall of her breathing. As you sit there munching on stale bread, memories begin to surface. Conversations from yesterday evening when neighbors gathered in their courtyard, sharing stories and news. The way the sunlight danced through the windows as it set over Mount Vesuvius, a sight you'd grown accustomed to but still found breathtaking. Your gaze drifts toward that mountain now, its silhouette dark against the star-studded sky. The sound of night air stirs outside, crickets chirping in unison, their soft melodies mingling with the distant rumble of water flowing through the city's aqueduct system. The night itself feels almost palpable, a gentle hum beneath your skin that you've grown accustomed to over time. In another part of the city, a merchant named Marcus is waking up in his own chambers above his shop on the Via della Bendanza. His wife, Aurelia, stirs beside him as he reaches for her hand under the covers. They share a soft kiss before rising and beginning their morning routine, washing faces, dressing quickly, and heading down to start preparing breakfast. Marcus's hands move with practiced ease as he expertly cracks eggs into a clay bowl. Today will be a busy day. Markets are in full swing during this season of the year, but first things first, they need to fuel up for their long hours ahead. The sun is still below the horizon, casting an eerie half-light over the city. You too eventually rise from your pallet, shaking off the last vestiges of sleep. Your companion dog follows you out into the courtyard as you begin preparing breakfast in earnest, gathering wood chips to light a new fire under the cooking pot, searching for any remaining food scraps in the larder. Tonight you've traveled through the misty veil of ancient Pompeii's final hours, where shadows danced upon crumbling walls and distant fires cast a faint glow on the streets. You witnessed the last meal at Lupanar 8, where laughter and tears mingled with the scent of burning incense. The forgotten fresco whispered secrets to you in hushed tones, its colors fading like embers in the darkness. Inhaling smoke for breakfast became a habitual ritual, as if Vesuvius itself was preparing them for their fate. You saw she who knew too much, her eyes clouded by foreboding and resignation. Weaving through these moments is a common thread, not of chaos or panic, but of an eerie calmness that permeated the air. It's as though the inhabitants knew they were living on borrowed time, yet went about their daily lives with a quiet acceptance, savoring every last breath of freedom before the inevitable. If you'd like to keep exploring, you can gently tap like and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey. And if you feel awake enough, leave a comment and share where in the world you're listening from, for it's through these connections that we weave our own tapestry of time. As you drift towards sleep, allow the city to recede into memory, its buildings dissolving like sandcastles at dawn. The details sink below the surface of thought, leaving behind only whispers of what was and will never be again. In this quiet, dark space, time itself becomes a gentle current that carries us forward, ever-changing yet eternal. And as we surrender to the Earth's long patience, our memories become part of its ancient heart, forever intertwined with the stones of Pompeii, a testament to the fleeting beauty of human existence, suspended in the stillness of the night.